When a billionaire's daughter grabbed a stranger's arm at the city's most exclusive charity gala and whispered, "Act like you're my husband," Lucas Reed knew two things instantly. She was terrified, and he was about to step into something far bigger than himself. But as cameras flashed and her controlling father's eyes narrowed across the ballroom, Lucas made a choice that would shatter the carefully constructed lies of Manhattan's most powerful family, and prove that sometimes the poorest man in the room is the only one rich enough to tell the truth. If you want to see how a single father with nothing to lose became the conscience of a corporate empire, stay with me until the end. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Hit that like button if you believe integrity matters more than inheritance. The Crystal Ballroom of the Metropolitan Grand Hotel had never seen Lucas Reed before, and Lucas had never wanted to see it. He stood just inside the entrance, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of wealth on display. Chandeliers the size of compact cars hung from gilded ceilings, dripping with crystals that caught the light and scattered it across marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Women in gowns that cost more than his annual rent glided past on the arms of men in custom tuxedos, their laughter practiced and hollow, their smiles as carefully maintained as their stock portfolios. Lucas tugged at the collar of his rented suit, the only one he owned, borrowed from his neighbor for a job interview that had fallen through 3 weeks ago. The fabric felt stiff and foreign against his skin, a costume that fooled no one. He didn't belong here, and everyone who glanced his way knew it. He'd come because his daughter Emma's school had donated tickets to the annual Harrington Foundation Gala as part of a community outreach program. The letter had made it sound like an honor. Lucas had read it as charity, which it was, but Emma had been so excited when he'd mentioned it that he couldn't bring himself to throw the tickets away. "Daddy, you'll see how fancy people live," she'd said, her 7-year-old eyes wide with wonder. "Like in the princess movies." He'd smiled and ruffled her hair, not having the heart to tell her that fairy tales were just stories, and places like this weren't meant for people like them. Instead, he'd asked Mrs. Chen from down the hall to watch Emma for the evening, pressed his shirt with an iron that sputtered and died halfway through, and taken the subway to Midtown. Now standing in the entryway while a server in white gloves offered him champagne from a silver tray, Lucas wondered what he'd been thinking. "Sir, may I take your coat?" A young attendant appeared at his elbow, professionally neutral, but with eyes that had already cataloged everything about Lucas. The slightly frayed cuffs, the shoes that had been polished but couldn't hide their age, the way he stood like someone ready to bolt. "No, thank you," Lucas said quietly. "I'm fine." The attendant nodded and moved away, and Lucas felt the familiar weight of being invisible settle over him. He'd felt it his whole life, in school, where teachers had looked past him to students with brighter futures, in job interviews where his lack of degree had ended conversations before they began, in his ex-wife's eyes when she'd realized that love wasn't enough to pay bills and had left him with Emma and a stack of debt. Being invisible had its advantages. It meant people didn't expect much from you. It meant you could observe without being observed, move through spaces without leaving a mark. But tonight, standing in a room full of people who shaped the world with their money and influence while he struggled to keep the electricity on, invisibility felt like erasure. Lucas had started to edge toward the exit, already composing the story he'd tell Emma, something about elegant music and beautiful decorations, enough to satisfy her curiosity without revealing his own discomfort, when the ballroom doors swept open and the crowd's energy shifted. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Heads turned. Even the string quartet seemed to play with renewed purpose. A woman had entered. She moved through the parting crowd with the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of being watched, her presence commanding attention without demanding it. Her gown was midnight blue, simple in cut but devastating in effect, and her dark hair was swept up in a style that suggested effortless elegance while probably requiring an hour of professional attention. But it wasn't her beauty that caught Lucas's attention. It was the tension in her shoulders, barely visible beneath the polished exterior. The way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The slight hesitation in her stride as she approached a group of older men in expensive suits. Lucas recognized fear when he saw it. He'd worn it often enough himself. "Claire, darling," one of the men stepped forward, his voice booming across the ballroom. He was in his 60s, distinguished in the way that powerful men often were, with silver hair and a face that had been handsome before ambition had hardened it. "Right on time. Come meet Senator Whitmore. He's been eager to speak with you." The woman, Claire, accepted a kiss on her cheek from the older man with practiced grace, but Lucas saw her hand tighten on her small evening bag. "Father," she said, her voice smooth and controlled, "I wasn't aware the senator would be here tonight." "Last-minute addition," her father said, his hand settling on her lower back in a gesture that looked protective but felt possessive. "He's very interested in our expansion into the healthcare sector. I told him you'd be delighted to discuss the particulars." "Of course." Claire's smile remained fixed, but something flickered in her eyes. Resignation, maybe, or anger buried so deep it had fossilized. Lucas should have looked away, should have continued his escape, returned to his real life where the dramas of the wealthy weren't his concern. But he found himself watching as Claire was guided into the circle of men, as her father's hand remained on her back, as a younger man, the senator's son, Lucas guessed from the resemblance, stepped too close and said something that made Claire's shoulders go rigid. The circle was closing around her. Lucas could see it happening, the casual positioning of bodies that blocked her exit, the way the conversation shifted to include her but not her input, the senator's son's hand moving toward her arm. And then, impossibly, Claire's eyes found his across the crowded ballroom. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, two people who had nothing in common except the shared understanding of what it meant to be trapped. Lucas saw desperation flash across her face, quickly masked but unmistakable. Then she moved. She excused herself from the circle with words Lucas couldn't hear, stepped around her father's reaching hand, and walked directly toward him. The crowd parted for her automatically, conversations faltering as people tried to understand what Claire Harrington, heiress to a billion-dollar empire, Manhattan royalty, the woman whose engagement announcement had been anticipated in the society pages for months, was doing crossing the ballroom to approach a man no one recognized. Lucas's instinct was to step back, to disappear into the crowd, but something in her expression held him in place. She walked with purpose, her chin high, but her eyes were pleading. She reached him and, without hesitation, took his arm. Her touch was firm, her fingers cool against his sleeve. Up close, Lucas could see the fine tension in her jaw, the way her breathing was carefully controlled. "I need your help," she said quietly, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "Please don't ask questions. Please just—" "Claire!" Her father's voice cut across the space between them, sharp with warning. She flinched, almost imperceptibly, and her grip on Lucas's arm tightened. Then she leaned in close, her lips near his ear, and whispered 6 words that would change everything. "Act like you're my husband. Please." Lucas's mind went blank with shock. Around them, he could hear the whispers starting, see heads turning, feel the weight of hundreds of curious eyes. Cameras flashed. There were photographers here, he realized, society reporters documenting the gala for tomorrow's papers. He should have pulled away, should have apologized and fled, should have protected himself from whatever situation he was being pulled into. Instead, he looked down at Claire's face, at the fear poorly hidden beneath polished composure, at the silent plea in her eyes, and made a choice that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with the part of himself that had always stood up for people who needed standing up for, even when it cost him. "Okay," he said simply. Relief flooded her expression, so profound that Lucas understood this wasn't a game or a whim. She was genuinely afraid. Then her father reached them. "Claire," Richard Harrington's voice was controlled, but Lucas could hear the steel beneath. "What exactly is going on?" Claire turned to face her father, her hand still on Lucas's arm, and her voice was steady when she spoke. "Father, I'd like you to meet my husband." The word hung in the air between them, impossible and irrevocable. Richard Harrington's eyes moved to Lucas for the first time, and Lucas felt himself being assessed with the brutal efficiency of a man who made billion-dollar decisions before breakfast. He saw everything Lucas was and wasn't in less than 3 seconds. The cheap suit, the calloused hands, the complete absence of the markers that would make him acceptable in this world. "Your husband," Richard repeated slowly, each word precisely enunciated. "Yes." Claire's voice didn't waver, but Lucas felt her trembling against his arm. "I see." Richard's expression revealed nothing, but the temperature in their small corner of the ballroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. And when exactly did this marriage take place? 6 months ago, Claire said. Lucas admired her commitment to the lie, even as his mind raced trying to understand what he'd stepped into. We kept it quiet. I wanted to wait for the right moment to tell you. The right moment. Richard's laugh was cold. And you chose tonight? At the Foundation Gala? In front of the senator and his family? I chose tonight because you chose tonight to ambush me with James Whitmore, Claire said. And now Lucas heard anger beneath her composure. How long did you think you could keep arranging these chance encounters before I understood what you were doing? I'm trying to secure your future, Richard said. The Whitmore connection would be beneficial for Harrington Industries, Claire interrupted. Yes, I know. Everything is beneficial for Harrington Industries, including, apparently, selling your daughter to the highest political bidder. The words were quiet, but they landed like grenades. Around them, Lucas could see people pretending not to listen while hanging on every syllable. He wanted to disappear, to remove himself from this family drama, but Claire's hand on his arm was the only thing keeping her upright, and he couldn't bring himself to let go. We'll discuss this privately, Richard said, his voice hard. No. Claire's voice was firm. I'm tired of private discussions that end with you making decisions about my life. I'm married. I'm happy. And I'm not interested in whatever arrangement you had planned with Senator Whitmore. Claire, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. For the first time in years, I'm being completely reasonable. She turned to Lucas, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of gratitude and apology. Shall we get some air? Lucas nodded, not trusting his voice. Claire guided him away from her father, through the stunned crowd, toward the terrace doors at the far end of the ballroom. Behind them, Lucas could hear Richard Harrington's voice, low and angry, speaking to someone, probably trying to control the narrative, to spin what had just happened into something manageable. The cool night air hit them as they stepped onto the terrace. The sounds of the gala muted behind the glass doors, replaced by the distant hum of Manhattan traffic and the rustle of wind through potted trees. Claire released Lucas's arm and walked to the railing, her hands gripping the ornate ironwork. For a long moment, she just breathed, her shoulders rising and falling with the effort of maintaining control. I'm sorry, she said finally, not turning around. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into this. I saw you, and you looked like the only real person in that entire room, and I panicked. Lucas moved to stand beside her, giving her space but staying close enough to offer support. What's going on? Claire laughed, but it was a broken sound. What's going on is that my father has been trying to marry me off to James Whitmore for 6 months. James is the senator's son, charming, ambitious, and utterly soulless. My father sees it as a perfect merger, Harrington money and influence combined with Whitmore political connections. He's been arranging these accidental meetings, pressuring me to give James a chance, making it clear that my cooperation is expected. Expected, Lucas repeated quietly. Required. Claire's voice was bitter. My father doesn't ask. He arranges and you comply. That's how our family works. That's how his whole world works. Lucas thought about the men he'd seen surrounding her earlier, the way they'd positioned themselves, the possessive hand on her back. And you don't want to marry James Whitmore. I don't want to be treated like a corporate asset, Claire said. I don't want my entire life decided in boardroom meetings. I don't want... Her voice broke, and she stopped, pressing her lips together. Lucas waited. He'd learned a long time ago that sometimes the most helpful thing you could do was simply be present, to offer the space for someone to find their own words. I'm sorry, Claire said again, wiping her eyes carefully. You must think I'm ridiculous. Poor little rich girl, complaining about her luxury problems. I don't think that, Lucas said honestly. I think you're trapped, and trap is a trap regardless of how gilded the cage is. Claire turned to look at him then, really look at him, and Lucas saw surprise in her expression. Who are you? Lucas Reed. He offered a small smile. Single father, struggling to keep the lights on, definitely not anyone's husband. Oh, God. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. You're not married, are you? I didn't even think... Divorced, Lucas said. 2 years now. It's just me and my daughter. How old? 7. Her name's Emma. Something soft crossed Claire's face. That's a beautiful name. She's a beautiful kid, Lucas said simply. Smart, funny, kinder than I deserve. I doubt that. Claire studied him with an intensity that made Lucas uncomfortable. You didn't have to help me. You could have walked away, saved yourself from whatever mess I'm dragging you into. Why didn't you? Lucas shrugged. You look scared. I don't walk away from people who are scared. Even strangers? Especially strangers, Lucas said. Strangers are the ones who need help most. They don't have anyone else. Claire was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. My father is going to come out here any minute. He's going to demand explanations, threaten legal action, probably try to bribe you to disappear. He's very good at making problems disappear. I'm not a problem, Lucas said, and I'm not easily bribed. I don't have enough to lose. Everyone has something to lose. Maybe. Lucas looked back through the glass doors at the glittering ballroom, the wealthy elite still pretending not to watch them. But sometimes the things we're afraid of losing aren't worth keeping. Before Claire could respond, the terrace doors opened, but it wasn't Richard Harrington who emerged. It was a younger man, handsome and in sharp way, with blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Claire, he said smoothly, ignoring Lucas completely, your father asked me to check on you. He's concerned about this misunderstanding. Hello, James, Claire said, her voice carefully neutral. There's no misunderstanding. I was just introducing my husband to the fresh air. James's eyes finally moved to Lucas, dismissive and cold. Your husband. Right. Claire, this is absurd. Whatever point you're trying to make. I'm not making a point, Claire interrupted. I'm stating a fact. A fact. James's smile turned condescending. Let me tell you some facts. Your father is inside right now, furious. The senator is insulted. And you're standing here with some nobody claiming a marriage that doesn't exist for reasons I can only assume are designed to embarrass your family. I'm standing here with my husband, Claire said firmly, who has more integrity in his little finger than you'll have in your entire political career. James's facade cracked, revealing anger beneath. You think you can do better than me? Than my family? Look at him, Claire. Look at what you're choosing. He doesn't even belong in that suit. Lucas felt the familiar sting of shame, the old wounds of not being enough. But before he could speak, Claire stepped between them. You're right, she said, her voice sharp as broken glass. He doesn't belong in that suit. He belongs in honesty, in decency, in actually caring about people instead of using them. All things you wouldn't recognize if they were written on your campaign posters. Claire, we're done here, James. Go back inside. Tell my father I'll speak with him tomorrow. Tonight, I'm with my husband. James looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Claire's expression stopped him. He turned to Lucas instead, his voice low and threatening. I don't know who you are or what you think you're doing, but you've made a very serious mistake. People don't cross the Harringtons without consequences. I'm not crossing anyone, Lucas said calmly. I'm just standing here with someone who asked for help. Help? James laughed. Is that what you call it? How much is she paying you? She's not, because whatever it is, I'll double it, triple it. Walk away now and you'll never have to worry about money again. The offer hung in the air, tempting and terrible. Lucas thought about Emma, about the stack of unpaid bills on his kitchen counter, about the jobs he'd lost and the opportunities he'd missed. He thought about what that kind of money could mean: security, stability, a future. Then he looked at Claire, at the way she was watching him, waiting to see if he was like everyone else in her life, someone who could be bought, whose principles had a price. No, Lucas said simply. James blinked. No? I said no, thank you. Lucas kept his voice respectful but firm. I'm not here for money. I'm here because someone needed help. You're a fool, James said flatly. Maybe, Lucas agreed. But I sleep well at night. James's expression turned ugly. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Lucas could hear. You have no idea what you've stepped into. Richard Harrington will destroy you. He'll take everything you have, everyone you love, and he'll grind them into dust just to make a point. Is that really worth it? For a woman you met 15 minutes ago? Lucas felt fear curl in his stomach, real, cold fear for Emma, for what his choice tonight might cost them both. But he thought about the man he wanted his daughter to grow up knowing, the example he wanted to set. "Yes," he said, "it is." James stared at him for a long moment, then shook his head in disgust. "Your funeral." He turned and walked back into the ballroom, leaving Lucas and Claire alone on the terrace once more. Claire was trembling, Lucas realized. Not with fear, with barely contained emotion that might have been anger or relief or both. "You should have taken the money," she said quietly. "Probably," Lucas agreed. "My father really will try to destroy you. James wasn't exaggerating." "I know." "So why?" Claire turned to face him fully. "Why are you doing this?" Lucas thought about how to answer, about the truth beneath his choice. "When my wife left, she told me I would never amount to anything because I kept choosing people over profit. She said I'd always be poor because I couldn't learn to look out for myself first." He paused, remembering the pain of those words. "She was right about the poor part, but I'd rather be poor and able to look at myself in the mirror than rich and ashamed of who I am." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "I don't even know you." "I know. But you needed someone to be on your side, and I was there. That's enough." "It shouldn't have to be enough," Claire said. "It shouldn't be that simple." "It's not simple," Lucas said. "It's actually incredibly complicated. But the choice itself is simple. You help when you can." The terrace doors opened again, and this time Richard Harrington himself emerged, followed by two men in dark suits who looked like security. His expression was thunderous. "Claire, this has gone far enough," he said without preamble. "Say goodbye to your friend and come inside. We need to talk." "We can talk tomorrow," Claire said. "We'll talk now." Richard's voice was steel. "This is not a request. And I'm not a child," Claire shot back. "I'm a grown woman, and I'm leaving. With my husband." "Husband." Richard's gaze shifted to Lucas, and Lucas felt the full weight of his contempt. "You're no one's husband. You're a fraud who saw an opportunity and took it. How much did she promise you?" "Nothing," Lucas said. "Everyone wants something," Richard said dismissively. "Name your price, and let's end this farce." "There is no price," Lucas replied. "I don't want your money." "Then you're either lying or an idiot." Richard stepped closer, intimidating in a way that had nothing to do with physical size and everything to do with decades of crushing anyone who opposed him. "Let me make something very clear, Mr. Reed, Lucas Reed. Mr. Reed, my daughter is not available for whatever fantasy you've constructed. She has responsibilities, a future that's been carefully planned, and a family that will not tolerate interference from opportunists. Whatever Claire has told you, whatever she's promised you, it's irrelevant. She's had momentary lapses before. They pass." The casual dismissal of Claire as someone incapable of making her own decisions sparked anger in Lucas's chest. "With respect, sir, Claire is standing right here. Maybe you should ask her what she wants instead of telling her." The air between them crackled with tension. Richard's expression turned deadly cold. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he said quietly. "I can make one phone call and have your life investigated down to your kindergarten records. Another call, and you'll lose your job, if you even have one. A third, and you'll find it very difficult to find employment anywhere in this city. I can make you disappear, Mr. Reed, and it would take me less effort than ordering lunch." Lucas believed him, every word, but he also thought about Emma, about the lessons she learned by watching him, and he stood his ground. "You could do all those things," Lucas said, "but that wouldn't change the fact that your daughter asked me for help because she didn't feel like she could ask you. Maybe that's something worth thinking about." For a moment, Richard Harrington looked genuinely shocked, as if no one had spoken to him that way in decades. Then his expression hardened further. "Claire," he said, not taking his eyes off Lucas, "you have 1 minute to end this or I will." Claire stepped forward, moving between her father and Lucas in a mirror of how she'd positioned herself with James. "I'm leaving now, Father. You can try to stop me, but it will cause a scene, and I know how much you hate scenes, especially in front of the senator and the foundation board." "Claire, I'll call you tomorrow," she said firmly. "We can discuss this like adults. But right now, I'm going home with Lucas." She took Lucas's hand. Her palm was cold, her grip desperate, and started walking toward the terrace stairs that led to the street. Lucas went with her, his heart pounding, acutely aware of Richard Harrington's eyes burning into his back. They made it halfway down the stairs before Richard's voice rang out behind them. "This isn't over, Claire. And you, Mr. Reed, you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Lucas didn't respond. He simply kept walking, Claire's hand in his, down the stairs and away from the glittering ballroom, into the cool Manhattan night where the real world was waiting to remind them both that pretending to be married and actually navigating the consequences were two very different things. They walked in silence for 3 blocks before Claire finally spoke. "I don't actually expect you to take me home," she said quietly. "I have my own place. I needed to get out of there." "I understand," Lucas said. "Do you?" Claire stopped walking and turned to face him. "Because I'm not sure I do. I just blew up my entire life, claimed a husband I don't have, and dragged you into a war with one of the most powerful men in Manhattan. And I don't even know why you have a daughter to worry about, a life to protect. Why did you do it?" Lucas thought about the question, the real question beneath her words. Why had he chosen to be visible when invisibility had protected him his whole life? Why had he stepped forward when stepping back would have been so much safer? "When Emma was 4, Lucas said slowly, she fell at the playground. Split her lip pretty badly. I was there in seconds, holding her, trying to stop the bleeding, telling her it would be okay. And you know what she said to me?" Claire shook her head. "She said, 'Daddy, you came so fast.' Like she'd been surprised I'd shown up, like some part of her hadn't been sure I would." Lucas's voice roughened with emotion. "I never want her to doubt that when she needs help, someone will come. And the only way I can teach her that is by being that person, for her and for anyone else who needs it." Claire's eyes shimmered with tears. "You're a good father." "I try," Lucas said. "I fail a lot, but I try." They stood there on the sidewalk, strangers who'd become co-conspirators in the span of an hour, and Lucas felt the weight of what they'd started settling onto his shoulders. Tomorrow would bring consequences, for both of them. But tonight, for these few moments, they'd both chosen truth over convenience, and that had to count for something. "I should get back," Lucas said. "My neighbor is watching Emma, and I don't like leaving her too long." "Of course." Claire hesitated, then reached into her small bag and pulled out a business card. "My number, in case there are problems. I got you into this. The least I can do is help you navigate whatever comes next." Lucas took the card, their fingers brushing briefly. "Thank you." "I should be thanking you," Claire said. "You saved me tonight. From my father, from James, from myself. I won't forget that." "You don't owe me anything," Lucas said gently. "You asked for help. I gave it. That's the whole transaction." "Is it?" Claire asked. "Because something tells me this is just the beginning." She was right, Lucas knew. They'd set something in motion tonight that couldn't be easily stopped. But as he watched Claire flag down a taxi, as he started the long walk back to the subway that would take him home to his tiny apartment and his sleeping daughter, Lucas didn't regret his choice. He'd been invisible his whole life. Tonight, for the first time, he'd been seen. And that, he thought, as the city lights blurred around him, was worth whatever came next. The subway rattled through the darkness beneath Manhattan, and Lucas sat with his head tipped back against the smudged window, trying to process what had just happened. His reflection stared back at him, tired eyes, cheap suit, the face of a man who'd just walked away from more money than he'd see in a lifetime. The face of a fool, probably. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Mrs. Chen. "Emma's asleep. Take your time. Hope the fancy party was nice." Lucas smiled despite everything. Nice wasn't the word he'd use, but he typed back a quick thanks and slipped the phone away. In his other pocket, Claire Harrington's business card felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. He pulled it out, studying the elegant script. Claire Harrington, Vice President of Strategic Development, Harrington Industries. Vice President. He'd just claimed to be married to a vice president of a billion-dollar company. He'd stood on a terrace and told one of the most powerful men in Manhattan that his daughter needed help. He'd turned down what was probably a 6-figure bribe. The subway lurched to a stop at his station, and Lucas stepped out into the familiar grime of his neighborhood, so different from the polished marble of the Metropolitan Grand that it felt like a different planet entirely. He walked the 3 blocks to his building, climbed the 4 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken again, and let himself into the apartment quietly. Mrs. Chen was asleep in his armchair, her knitting in her lap. Lucas gently touched her shoulder, and she startled awake. "Oh, Lucas, I didn't hear you come in." She blinked, adjusting her glasses. "How was it?" "Eventful," Lucas said, helping her gather her things. "Thank you for watching Emma." "Any time, dear. She's an angel." Mrs. Chen paused at the door, studying his face with the perception of someone who'd raised 5 children of her own. "You look troubled. Everything okay?" "Just a long night," Lucas said, not wanting to lie but unable to explain the truth. "I'll be fine." After Mrs. Chen left, Lucas checked on Emma. She was curled up in her bed, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, her dark hair spread across the pillow. She looked so peaceful, so trusting. Lucas felt a surge of protective love so fierce it almost hurt. "I hope I didn't just make everything worse for us, sweetheart," he whispered, brushing a kiss across her forehead. He barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Richard Harrington's face, heard the cold promise in his voice. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Morning came too early. Lucas made Emma breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, nothing fancy, and got her ready for school. She chattered about her upcoming class field trip to the Natural History Museum, about her friend Sarah's new puppy, about everything and nothing, while Lucas tried to focus on her words instead of the dread building in his chest. "Daddy, you're quiet today," Emma said, pausing mid-bite of toast. "Are you sad?" "Not sad, baby, just thinking." "About what?" "Grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." Emma considered this, then reached across their small kitchen table and patted his hand with sticky fingers. "It's okay to be sad sometimes. You tell me that." Lucas felt his throat tighten. "You're right. I do tell you that. Thank you for reminding me." After he dropped Emma at school, Lucas headed to his job at Morrison's Hardware on 5th Street. It wasn't much, stocking shelves, helping customers, managing inventory, but it was steady work, and his boss, Mr. Morrison, was a decent man who didn't ask too many questions about Lucas's lack of formal education. The morning passed in the usual rhythm of work. Lucas unloaded a delivery truck, reorganized the paint section, helped an elderly woman find the right size of screws for her cabinet repair. Normal, mundane tasks that felt surreal after the previous night's drama. He was pricing a shipment of light fixtures when his phone rang. Unknown number. Lucas hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" "Mr. Reed." The voice was crisp, professional, female. "My name is Margaret Torres. I'm calling on behalf of Harrington Industries. Mr. Harrington would like to speak with you this afternoon. Would 2 o'clock work for your schedule?" Lucas's hands went cold. "I'm working this afternoon." "I'm sure your employer would understand if you needed to step away for an important meeting. We're prepared to compensate you for any lost wages." "What is this about?" "Mr. Harrington simply wishes to have a conversation. I have a car that can pick you up at your workplace. Morrison's Hardware, correct?" The fact that they already knew where he worked sent ice through Lucas's veins. Less than 12 hours, and they'd already tracked down his employment. Richard Harrington hadn't been bluffing about investigating him. "I don't think that's a good idea," Lucas said. "Mr. Reed, I strongly encourage you to reconsider. Mr. Harrington is a very busy man. When he makes time for someone, it's prudent to accept." The unspoken threat hung in the air between them. Lucas thought about refusing, about hanging up, and hoping they'd leave him alone. But he knew better. Men like Richard Harrington didn't make threats. They made promises. If Lucas didn't show up for this meeting, the consequences would come anyway, and he'd be even less prepared for them. 2 o'clock, Lucas said. "But I'll get there myself. I don't need a car." "As you wish. The Harrington Industries building, 42nd floor. Security will be expecting you." The line went dead. Lucas stood there, holding his phone, trying to steady his breathing. Across the store, Mr. Morrison looked up from the register. "Everything okay, Lucas?" "I need to take a long lunch today," Lucas said. "Personal business. I'll make up the time." "Sure, no problem." Mr. Morrison's weathered face creased with concern. "You're not in trouble, are you?" "I hope not," Lucas said honestly. At 1:30, Lucas changed out of his work clothes into the same suit he'd worn to the gala. It was wrinkled now, and he felt even more like an imposter wearing it in daylight, but it was all he had. He took the subway to Midtown and stood outside the Harrington Industries building, staring up at the gleaming tower of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the sky itself. Security was indeed expecting him. A guard checked his ID, made a phone call, then directed him to a private elevator that required a key card to operate. The elevator climbed smoothly, silently, and Lucas watched the floor numbers tick upward, feeling like he was ascending to his own execution. The doors opened onto the 42nd floor, and Lucas stepped into a reception area that redefined luxury. Everything was pristine white marble and dark wood, with abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than Lucas's entire building. Behind a curved desk sat a woman in her 40s, perfectly groomed with the kind of professional warmth that concealed steel underneath. "Mr. Reed," she said, standing. "I'm Margaret Torres. Thank you for coming. Please, follow me." She led him down a hallway lined with glass-walled conference rooms, past assistants at desks who looked up briefly and then away, dismissing him as unimportant. At the end of the hall, Margaret opened a heavy wooden door. "Mr. Harrington will be with you shortly. May I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "No, thank you," Lucas said. The office he entered was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. The furniture was minimalist and expensive, the bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes that looked more decorative than functional. Behind a desk large enough to land a small plane on sat Richard Harrington. He didn't look up when Lucas entered. He was reading something on a tablet, his expression neutral, and Lucas understood this was a power play, making him wait, reminding him who controlled this space and this conversation. Lucas didn't sit. He stood in front of the desk and waited. After a full minute, Richard set down the tablet and looked at him. "Sit." Lucas sat, keeping his spine straight, his hands relaxed on the chair arms. He'd learned a long time ago that the only power he had in situations like this was his own composure. "I've spent the morning learning about you, Mr. Reed," Richard said, picking up a folder from his desk. "Would you like to hear what I've found? If you'd like to share." Richard opened the folder. Lucas Andrew Reed, 32 years old, born in Philadelphia to Sarah and Thomas Reed, both deceased. Dropped out of community college after one semester. Married Catherine Wilson at age 23, divorced 2 years later. One child, Emma Reed, age 7, currently attending PS 147. You have joint custody, though Catherine waived physical custody and pays sporadic child support. He paused, looking up. You've had 17 jobs in the past 5 years. You're currently employed at Morrison's Hardware, where you make $13 an hour. You're 3 months behind on rent. You have $6,000 in credit card debt. Your car was repossessed last year. Shall I continue? Lucas felt each word like a blow, the casual recitation of his failures laid bare, but he kept his voice steady. You've done your homework. I always do. Richard closed the folder. Oh. Now let me tell you what that information tells me. It tells me you're desperate, struggling, one emergency away from complete financial collapse. It tells me you're the kind of man who would see an opportunity at a charity gala and take it, regardless of the consequences. That's not what happened. No? Richard leaned back in his chair. Then please enlighten me. Why would my daughter, who has never shown interest in anyone from your background, suddenly claim to be married to you? You'd have to ask her that. I'm asking you. Lucas met his eyes. She asked me to help her. I did. That's all. That's all, Richard repeated. You expect me to believe that you walked away from James Whitmore's very generous offer out of pure altruism? That you have no agenda, no plan to leverage this situation for your own benefit? I don't expect you to believe anything, Lucas said, but it's the truth. Richard studied him for a long moment, and Lucas had the uncomfortable feeling of being analyzed by someone who'd spent decades reading people, finding their weaknesses, exploiting their desires. Let me make you a different offer, Richard said finally. $1 million, cash, deposited in an account today. All you have to do is disappear from my daughter's life. No contact, no meetings, no dramatic public statements. You walk away, and you never have to worry about money again. Lucas felt the number hit him like a physical force. $1 million. He could pay off every debt, get a real apartment, put Emma in a good school, secure their future. He could stop struggling, stop failing, Stop being the invisible man who couldn't provide for his daughter. Think about it, Richard continued, his voice smooth. Think about what that money would mean for Emma. Private schools, college tuition, medical care if she needs it, security, stability, everything you've been unable to give her. The words cut deep because they were true. Lucas had failed to give Emma so many things. And here was the chance to fix that, to finally be the provider he'd always wanted to be. You love your daughter, Richard said. I can see that. So love her enough to give her the life she deserves. Take the money, Mr. Reed. Walk away. Let Claire return to her actual life and you return to yours. Only much more comfortable. Lucas thought about Emma's face that morning, the way she'd patted his hand and told him it was okay to be sad. He thought about the man he wanted her to grow up knowing, the values he wanted to teach her. No, he said quietly. Richard's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Excuse me? I said no, thank you for the offer, but I'm not interested. Not interested in $1 million. Richard's voice was flat with disbelief. Mr. Reed, I don't think you understand the gravity of your situation. You're drowning financially. This money could save you. Maybe, Lucas said, but it would cost me something more important. And what's that? My daughter's respect, my own integrity, the ability to look at myself in the mirror. Lucas stood, his decision made. I appreciate your time, Mr. Harrington, but I should get back to work. Sit down. The command was sharp, the veneer of civility cracking. We're not finished. I think we are, Lucas said. You've made your offer. I've declined. There's nothing else to discuss. There's plenty to discuss, Richard said, standing as well. His height and presence were intimidating, but Lucas held his ground. You've inserted yourself into my family's business. You've embarrassed us publicly. You've interfered with carefully laid plans. Those actions have consequences. I haven't done anything except help someone who asked for help. You've done far more than that, whether you realize it or not. Richard moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. Claire is not thinking clearly. She's never thought clearly. She's too emotional, too idealistic, too concerned with abstract concepts like fairness and compassion. That's why she needs guidance. That's why I make decisions for her benefit. Lucas felt anger spark in his chest. She's not a child. She's a grown woman capable of making her own choices. She's my daughter, and she's part of this family. Her choices affect Harrington Industries, our investors, our employees. She doesn't have the luxury of personal whims. Personal whims like choosing who she wants to spend time with. Personal whims like throwing away a strategic alliance with the Whitmores because she's having some kind of rebellious phase. Richard's voice hardened. James Whitmore will be a senator within 5 years, possibly more. A connection to that family would open doors that Claire doesn't want opened, Lucas interrupted. Did you ever ask her what she wants? Or did you just decide for her? The question hung between them, sharp and accusatory. Richard's face darkened with anger. You have no right to question how I manage my family. I'm not questioning how you manage your family. I'm questioning whether you see Claire as family or as a business asset. The words were out before Lucas could stop them, too honest and too blunt. He saw Richard's expression shift from anger to something colder, more dangerous. Get out, Richard said, his voice deadly quiet. Get out of my office, out of my building, and out of my daughter's life. And understand this, Mr. Reed, I gave you a chance to walk away with dignity and financial security. You chose to refuse. Now there's no offer, no negotiation, no easy exit. There's only what I choose to do to you, and I promise you it will be thorough. Lucas felt fear crawl up his spine, but he didn't let it show on his face. I'm not afraid of you. You should be. Richard moved to his desk and pressed a button on his phone. Margaret, please escort Mr. Reed out and contact building security. I want his photo on file. He's not to be admitted to this building again under any circumstances. Yes, sir. Margaret's voice came through the speaker. Lucas turned to leave, but Richard's voice stopped him at the door. Mr. Reed, one more thing. Lucas looked back. Claire will come to her senses, Richard said with absolute certainty. She always does. And when she does, when she realizes that her little rebellion has accomplished nothing except making her life more difficult, she'll move on, and you'll be left with nothing but the memory of how close you came to changing your life. Think about that when you're stocking shelves for $13 an hour. Lucas met his eyes one last time. I'd rather stock shelves for the rest of my life than be the kind of man who treats people like chess pieces. He walked out before Richard could respond. Margaret was waiting in the hallway, her professional mask firmly in place. She escorted him to the elevator in silence, and Lucas felt the weight of the entire 42nd floor watching him leave, the poor man who dared to step into their world and had just been dismissed. The elevator doors closed, and Lucas slumped against the wall, his hands shaking with adrenaline. He'd just refused $1 million. He'd just made an enemy of one of the most powerful men in Manhattan. He'd just guaranteed that whatever came next would be brutal. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Lucas, it's Claire. My father just called me. We need to talk. Can you meet me? Lucas stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. Every logical part of his brain was screaming at him to end this now, to text back that it was over, to protect himself and Emma from whatever Richard Harrington was about to unleash. But he thought about the fear in Claire's eyes last night, about the desperation that had driven her to grab a stranger's arm, about the way her father spoke about her like she was property to be managed rather than a person to be loved. He typed, "Where and when?" The response came immediately. "Central Park, Bethesda Fountain, 1 hour. Please come. It's important." Lucas put his phone away and stepped out of the elevator into the lobby. He walked past the security desk where a guard was already adding his photo to some kind of database, out through the revolving doors, back into the ordinary world where he belonged. He had an hour to decide if he was brave or stupid. He had a feeling the answer was both. Lucas walked through Central Park with his hands shoved deep in his pockets, watching joggers and tourists and people whose biggest problem today was probably deciding where to have lunch. The normalcy of it all felt surreal after the morning he'd just had. An hour ago, he'd been in a glass tower being threatened by a billionaire. Now he was walking past street musicians and hot dog carts, heading toward a meeting that would probably make everything worse. He spotted Claire before she saw him. She was sitting on the edge of Bethesda Fountain, staring at the water, her posture rigid with tension. She'd traded last night's elegant gown for dark jeans and a cream sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and somehow she looked even more beautiful in daylight, real and human and vulnerable in a way the polished heiress at the gala hadn't been. She looked up as he approached, and relief flooded her face. "You came. I wasn't sure you would." "You said it was important," Lucas said, sitting down beside her but leaving space between them. Close enough to talk, far enough to maintain the fiction that they were strangers who'd only met 12 hours ago. "My father called me this morning," Claire said without preamble. I've never heard him that angry. He told me what happened, about the meeting, about what he offered you." Lucas waited, unsure what to say. $1 million, Claire continued, her voice tight. "He offered you $1 million to disappear from my life, and you said no." "I did." "Why?" The question burst out of her, raw and confused. "Lucas, I saw your file. My father showed it to me. Everything about your financial situation, your struggles, your daughter. That money could have changed your entire life. Why would you turn it down?" Lucas looked out at the fountain, watching water cascade over bronze angels. "Because taking it would have been admitting that everything can be bought, that everyone has a price, and I don't want my daughter growing up believing that." Claire's voice broke. "That's insane. That's beautiful and insane and completely irrational." "Probably," Lucas agreed. "But rationality isn't always the same as being right." Claire was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I grabbed you at the gala. Sorry I dragged you into this mess. Sorry my father is now threatening to destroy your life because I was too much of a coward to stand up to him on my own." "You're not a coward," Lucas said firmly. "You stood up to him last night. You told him no in front of everyone who matters in your world. That took courage." "It took desperation," Claire corrected. "And it took you being there, being willing to stand with me even though you had no reason to." "I had a reason. You needed help." "But now you need help," Claire said, turning to face him fully. "My father meant what he said. He's going to come after you, your job, your custody of Emma, everything. He'll use every resource he has to make you wish you'd never met me. Lucas felt cold fear settle in his stomach at the mention of Emma, at the reminder that his choices didn't just affect him. What do you think he'll do? I don't know exactly, but I know how he operates. He'll start with your employment, make some calls, apply some pressure, get you fired. Then he'll move to character assassination. He'll find people from your past willing to say things about you, true or not. He'll build a case that you're unstable, opportunistic, a bad influence. Claire's hands were trembling. And if that doesn't work, he'll go after Emma. Not directly. He's too smart for that. But he'll question your ability to care for her, suggest that a struggling single father working minimum wage isn't providing adequate support. He'll make it look like he's concerned for a child's welfare when really he's just punishing you. Lucas felt rage and terror warring in his chest. He would do that? Use a 7-year-old child as leverage? He would do anything to protect what he sees as the family's interests, Claire said bleakly. I've seen him do it before, to business rivals, to employees who crossed him, to anyone who stood in his way. He doesn't see it as cruelty. He sees it as necessary strategy. Then why tell me this? Lucas asked. If he's that powerful, that ruthless, why are you here warning me instead of walking away and letting me deal with the consequences? Claire met his eyes, and Lucas saw steel beneath her sadness. Because I'm done letting my father control my life, because you were willing to stand up for me when no one else would, and because, she paused, struggling with the words, because you deserve to know what you're facing. You deserve the chance to protect yourself and Emma, and you deserve to hear me say that if you want to walk away now, I'll understand. I'll tell my father the truth, that I used you, that it was all my idea, that you were just being kind to someone in trouble. I'll take full responsibility. And then what? Lucas asked. He forces you to marry James Whitmore? You spend the rest of your life being traded between powerful men who see you as a trophy? Maybe, Claire admitted. Or maybe I find another way. I don't know. But I can't let you sacrifice everything for a stranger's problems. Lucas thought about the easy path she was offering. Walk away, let her handle it, return to his anonymous life. It was logical, safe, the smart choice for someone who had too much to lose and nothing to gain. No, he said. Claire blinked. No? I'm not walking away. Not yet. Lucas turned to face her fully. Last night, you said you were tired of private discussions where your father makes all the decisions. You said you wanted to be heard, to have agency in your own life. Was that true? Or were you just saying what you needed to say to escape? It was true, Claire said quietly. It's been true for years. But wanting something and achieving it are different things. They are, Lucas agreed. But you don't achieve anything by giving up before you start. You stood up to your father last night. You chose to leave with me even though you knew there would be consequences. That matters. It matters that you're now in danger because of me. I'm in danger because your father is a bully who thinks money and power mean he can control everyone around him, Lucas corrected. That's not your fault. That's his choice. Claire looked at him with something like wonder. How are you this calm? You just turned down $1 million. My father threatened to destroy you, and you're sitting here telling me not to give up. Don't you understand what you're facing? I understand perfectly, Lucas said. I'm facing a man with unlimited resources, no conscience about using them, and a daughter he sees as property instead of a person. I'm facing the real possibility of losing my job, my home, maybe even custody of Emma if he pushes hard enough. I'm facing the fact that I'm completely outmatched in every way that matters in his world. Then why? Because I'm not in his world, Lucas interrupted. I'm in mine. And in my world, you don't abandon people who need help just because helping them is hard. You don't let bullies win just because they're bigger and richer and meaner than you. You stand up because standing up is the right thing to do, even if you lose. Claire's eyes filled with tears. You're going to lose, Lucas. He's too powerful. This isn't a movie where the underdog wins through sheer determination. This is real life, and in real life, men like my father crush men like you without even slowing down. Maybe, Lucas said. Probably. But at least I'll have tried. At least Emma will know that her father didn't back down when it mattered. Emma? Claire said softly. Tell me about her. Please. I need to understand what you're risking. Lucas smiled despite everything, the way he always did when he thought about his daughter. She's 7. Smart as hell. Funny. Ridiculously kind. She gives half her lunch to a kid at school whose parents can't afford the meal plan. She saves her allowance to buy food for the stray cat in our alley. She tells me stories she makes up about brave knights and clever princesses who save themselves. His voice roughened. She's better than I deserve, and she's the reason I get up every morning and keep trying even when everything feels impossible. She sounds wonderful, Claire said. She is, and she's why I can't take your father's money, why I can't teach her that principles are only valuable until someone offers you enough to compromise them. She needs to see that some things matter more than money. Even if standing on principle means she suffers? Claire asked gently. If your father loses his job, loses custody, what does that teach her? The question hit Lucas hard because it was the same one that had kept him awake all night. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe it teaches her that doing the right thing sometimes costs everything. Maybe that's a terrible lesson. But teaching her that you abandon people who need help, that you walk away when things get hard, that you let powerful people do whatever they want because fighting back is too risky, those feel like worse lessons. Claire was quiet, and Lucas could see her processing, weighing his words against her own fears and doubts. Finally, she spoke. What if we didn't walk away? What if we actually did this? Lucas frowned. Did what? Committed to the story we started last night. Claire's voice gained strength as the idea took shape. We're married. Actually, married, or at least engaged. We present a united front. My father can't dismiss you as easily if I'm actively choosing you, if I'm standing beside you publicly and privately. Claire, listen to me, she interrupted, leaning forward with sudden intensity. My father's power comes from controlling the narrative. He threatened you because he assumes you'll fold under pressure, that I'll cave and apologize, and everything will return to his version of normal. But what if we don't let him control the story? What if we give him something he can't easily dismiss? A fake marriage, Lucas said flatly. A real engagement, Claire corrected. Not marriage yet. That would be too extreme, too obviously false. But an engagement. A relationship that developed quickly but genuinely. Two people from different worlds who found something real and chose to build on it despite the obstacles. Lucas shook his head. That's insane. No one will believe it. Why not? Claire challenged. People fall in love quickly all the time. And honestly, the story almost writes itself. Wealthy woman tired of shallow men in her social circle meets genuine, hardworking single father. It's practically a romance novel. It's a lie, Lucas said. Is it? Claire asked. We did meet. I did ask for your help, and you gave it without hesitation. That's real. The attraction could be real too. We're both adults, both unattached. We could sell this, Lucas. We could make my father think twice about coming after you because destroying you would mean publicly hurting his future son-in-law. Lucas wanted to dismiss it, to tell her it was too risky, too complicated, too many ways it could blow up in both their faces. But there was logic to it. Cold, strategic logic that he could see appealing to someone raised in Richard Harrington's world. What would that actually look like, he asked carefully. If we did this, what would you expect from me? Claire took a breath, clearly having thought this through. Public appearances together, enough to establish that we're a couple, that this is serious. I'd need you to come to some events, foundation meetings, maybe a dinner or two with the board, places where my father and his allies would see us together and have to accept that I'm not changing my mind. And privately? We'd need to spend some time together, get to know each other well enough that we can answer basic questions about our relationship without contradicting each other. But I'm not asking you to move in or pretend to be in love or anything beyond what's necessary to sell the story publicly. For how long? Claire hesitated. I don't know. Long enough to make my point, to establish that I'm not backing down. A few months, maybe? Long enough that when we eventually break up, it looks like a natural end rather than me caving to pressure. Lucas tried to process what she was proposing. Months of pretending to be engaged, of being pulled deeper into a world where he didn't belong, of putting himself and Emma in the crosshairs of Richard Harrington's vengeance. But also months of Claire having backup, of not facing her father's manipulation alone, of maybe, just maybe, creating enough space for her to figure out what she actually wanted instead of what she was told to want. And Emma? he asked. If we're doing public appearances, if this becomes a story, she'll be affected. People will talk, reporters might show up at her school, kids might say things. I can't protect her from all of that. I know, Claire said quietly. And I wouldn't ask you to do this if I didn't think we could minimize the impact on her. But Lucas, if your father comes after you anyway, if he destroys your job and tries to take custody, Emma gets hurt either way. At least this way, you're fighting back. At least she sees you standing up instead of being crushed. Lucas looked at Claire, really looked at her. Beneath the designer clothes and the boarding school accent and the trust fund confidence was someone genuinely afraid, genuinely desperate for an ally in a life where everyone else saw her as a means to an end, someone willing to take a huge risk on a stranger because that stranger had shown her basic human decency. If I agree to this, Lucas said slowly, I need some ground rules. Hope flickered across Claire's face. Anything. First, Emma's safety and well-being come before everything else. If at any point this starts affecting her badly, if she's scared or confused or hurt, we end it immediately, regardless of where things stand with your father. Agreed, Claire said without hesitation. Second, we're honest with each other, even if we're lying to everyone else. I need to be able to trust you, and you need to be able to trust me. No games, no manipulation, no using this situation for purposes we haven't agreed on. Agreed. Third, Lucas continued, his voice harder now, you use your resources to protect me and Emma from your father's retaliation. I don't want your money, but I do want information. Warning if he's planning something, legal help if he comes after custody, whatever you can do to level the playing field. I can do that, Claire said. I have access to the family lawyers, contacts in the media, ways to push back that don't require me to directly confront my father. And I have money of my own, separate from the family trust. If you need financial support, I don't want your money, Lucas interrupted. I meant what I said about that. I'll take help protecting Emma and keeping my job, but I won't take cash payments. That crosses a line for me. Claire studied him with something like fascination. You really mean that, don't you? Most people in your situation would be negotiating for as much as they could get. I'm not most people, Lucas said simply. And I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror when this is over. Okay, Claire said softly. No direct financial compensation, just protection and support. Anything else? Lucas thought about what he was agreeing to, about the enormity of the lie they were about to commit to. One more thing. When this ends, when we eventually stage our breakup or whatever, we do it in a way that doesn't destroy either of us. No dramatic accusations, no he said, she said in the media. We end it like adults who tried something that didn't work out. That seems fair, Claire agreed. Then she extended her hand. So we have a deal? You and me against my father's empire? Lucas looked at her outstretched hand, thinking about everything this handshake would set in motion. He thought about Emma, about the risks and the potential consequences. He thought about Richard Harrington's cold threats and James Whitmore's entitled sneer. He thought about Claire's desperate eyes in the ballroom last night, about the fear that had driven her to grab a stranger's arm. He took her hand. We have a deal, he said. Claire's grip was firm, her palm warm against his. Thank you, Lucas. You have no idea what this means to me. I think I'm starting to understand, Lucas said. But Claire, you need to understand something too. I'm not doing this because I expect anything from you. I'm doing it because it's right, because you deserve to have someone in your corner. But that's all this is. Two people helping each other. I'm not interested in your money or your connections or whatever benefits might come from being associated with the Harrington name. I know, Claire said. That's why I trust you. That's why you're the only person I could ask. They sat there for a moment, hands still clasped, and Lucas felt the weight of what they'd just agreed to settle onto his shoulders. He was now engaged, fake engaged, but still, to one of the richest women in Manhattan. He was about to step even further into a world where he didn't belong, playing a role he had no training for, against opponents who'd been playing power games since before he was born. He must be insane. So what happens now? He asked, releasing Claire's hand. Now we make this look real, Claire said, her voice shifting into something more strategic, more focused. We need a story about how we met, how the relationship developed, something believable that we can both tell consistently. Lucas nodded. Okay, how about this? We met 6 months ago at a community event in my neighborhood. The Harrington Foundation was doing some kind of outreach program, and you were there representing the company. We started talking, exchanged numbers, started seeing each other casually. Why would I be at a community event in your neighborhood? Claire asked, not critically but genuinely trying to work out the logistics. The foundation does fund community programs, Lucas said. It wouldn't be that strange for you to visit, especially if you're trying to understand where the money goes. That works, Claire said, and it fits with my actual role at the company. I do oversee some of the charitable programs. We could say I was visiting PS 147, saw you picking up Emma, and we struck up a conversation. You approached me? Why not? It makes the story more credible. The wealthy woman who sees something genuine in the struggling single father. It's honest enough to be believable, but romantic enough to make sense of the quick engagement. Lucas felt uncomfortable with how easily Claire slipped into strategic thinking, how quickly she could construct a believable lie. But then again, she'd been raised in this world, trained from birth to manage appearances and control narratives. What about Emma? Lucas asked. If we've supposedly been dating for 6 months, she would know about you. Claire bit her lip, thinking. We could say we kept it quiet from her initially because you wanted to be sure it was serious before introducing her to someone new. That's actually pretty responsible parenting. Then maybe we can arrange to actually meet her, start building a real relationship so we're not completely lying. The idea of introducing Emma to Claire, of bringing his daughter into this elaborate deception, made Lucas's stomach turn. But Claire was right. If they were going to sell this, Emma would need to at least know who Claire was. I'll need to talk to her first, Lucas said firmly. Explain things in a way that makes sense to a 7-year-old. And we go slow, no sudden sleepovers or playing house. Just gradual introduction as someone Daddy is spending time with. Of course, Claire agreed. I wouldn't want to confuse or upset her. We can take it at whatever pace works for both of you. Lucas nodded, trying to imagine how he'd explain this to Emma. Daddy's new friend who's helping us with some grown-up problems? The nice lady who wants to spend time with us? Every option felt like a betrayal of the honesty he'd always tried to maintain with his daughter. When do we go public? He asked. Soon, Claire said, before my father can control the narrative. I'm thinking we make an appearance at the Foundation's quarterly board meeting on Friday. It's a semi-public event, board members, senior staff, some invited guests. Not huge media presence, but enough people to spread the word. I'll introduce you as my fiancé, and we'll let the gossip do its work. Friday, Lucas repeated, his heart sinking. That's 3 days away. I know it's fast, but the longer we wait, the more time my father has to undermine you. If we strike first, establish our story before he can destroy yours, we have a better chance. Claire pulled out her phone. I'll need your sizes for a proper suit, something that fits better than what you wore to the gala. And we should meet tomorrow to get our stories straight, practice answering questions people might ask. Lucas felt overwhelmed by how quickly this was moving, how Claire had shifted from desperate woman asking for help to strategic operator managing a campaign. This is a lot. I know, Claire said, her voice softening. And I'm sorry to throw you into the deep end. But Lucas, my father doesn't wait. He's probably already making calls, already setting things in motion to discredit you. We need to move fast if we're going to have any chance of getting ahead of him. Lucas thought about Richard Harrington's cold promises, about the threat hanging over his job and his custody of Emma. Claire was right. Waiting wouldn't help. If they were going to do this, they needed to commit fully. Okay, he said. Friday. But I need to get back to work now, and I need time tonight to figure out what I'm going to tell Emma. Of course. Claire stood, and Lucas stood with her. I'll text you tomorrow with details about where to meet. And Lucas? She reached out and touched his arm gently. Thank you, again. I know I keep saying it, but I don't know how else to express how much it means that you're doing this. Just promise me we're doing the right thing, Lucas said, that we're not making everything worse. Claire's expression was complicated. Hope and fear and determination all mixed together. I promise we're doing the only thing I can see that doesn't end with both of us crushed under my father's heel. Whether that's the right thing, I guess we'll find out. She walked away across the park, her ponytail swinging, her posture straightening with each step as she returned to being Claire Harrington, vice president, and heiress. Lucas watched her go, then checked his phone and realized he'd been gone for over 2 hours. He needed to get back to Morrison's, needed to face whatever consequences came from his extended absence. The subway ride back was a blur of anxiety and second-guessing. He'd just agreed to fake an engagement with a woman he barely knew, to stand up against one of the most powerful men in Manhattan, to risk everything on the belief that doing the right thing mattered more than protecting himself. Mr. Morrison was behind the counter when Lucas returned, his expression carefully neutral. "Long lunch," he observed. "I'm sorry," Lucas said. "It won't happen again." "Hope everything's okay," Mr. Morrison said, and Lucas heard the unspoken question in his words. "It's complicated," Lucas admitted, "but I'm handling it." Mr. Morrison studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "You're a good worker, Lucas. Honest, reliable, good with customers. Whatever you're dealing with, I hope it works out." The kindness in his voice nearly broke Lucas's composure. "Thank you. That means a lot." The rest of the afternoon passed in mechanical routine, helping customers, restocking shelves, trying not to think about Friday and board meetings and the dozens of ways this could all fall apart. When his shift finally ended, Lucas trudged home through the gathering dusk, his mind churning with everything he needed to do, everything that could go wrong. Mrs. Chen had picked up Emma from school and was helping her with homework when Lucas arrived. Emma's face lit up when she saw him, and Lucas felt the familiar ache of love and fear. Love for this perfect small person who trusted him completely, fear that he was about to fail her in ways she couldn't even imagine yet. After Mrs. Chen left and Emma had eaten her dinner, Lucas sat down on the edge of her bed while she brushed her teeth. When she came back into the room in her pajamas, Rabbit clutched in her arms, he patted the space beside him. "Can we talk about something, baby?" Emma climbed up next to him, immediately concerned. "What's wrong, Daddy?" "Nothing's wrong," Lucas said, which was both true and the biggest lie he'd ever told. "But Daddy needs to tell you about someone new in his life." Emma's eyes went wide. "A girlfriend?" Lucas hesitated, then nodded. "Kind of. Her name is Claire and she's very nice. We've been spending some time together and I thought maybe you'd like to meet her soon." "Do you love her?" Emma asked with the bluntness of childhood. Lucas thought about how to answer honestly without explaining the full complexity of the situation. "I care about her a lot. She's someone who needs a friend right now, and I'm trying to be that for her. Like when I help Sarah at school because the other kids are mean to her?" "Exactly like that," Lucas said, grateful for the parallel. "Claire's going through some hard things, and I'm helping her through them." Emma nodded seriously, processing. "Is she pretty?" Lucas couldn't help but smile. "She is. But more importantly, she's smart and brave, and she's trying very hard to do the right thing, even when it's difficult." "Like you," Emma said simply. The words hit Lucas like a punch to the chest. "I try to be, sweetheart." "Can I meet her soon?" Emma asked, bouncing a little with excitement. "Can she come here? Will she like me?" "She'll love you," Lucas said, and he meant it. How could anyone not love Emma? "And yes, we'll arrange for you to meet her soon. But Emma, there's something else you need to know." Emma's bouncing stilled, picking up on his serious tone. "Some people might say things about Daddy and Claire. Some people might not understand why we're friends, might say mean things or ask you questions. If that happens, I want you to know that you can always come talk to me, okay? And if anyone makes you feel uncomfortable or scared, you tell me immediately." "Okay," Emma said, but Lucas could see confusion in her eyes. Why would people be mean? "Because sometimes grown-ups are complicated and silly," Lucas said, ruffling her hair. "But the important thing is that Daddy's always here for you, and nothing that happens with Claire or anyone else will ever change how much I love you. You know that, right?" "I know," Emma said, then threw her arms around his neck in a fierce hug. "I love you too, Daddy." Lucas held her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling the solid warmth of her small body against his chest. This was what mattered. Not Richard Harrington's threats, or boardroom politics, or complicated deceptions. This was real. This was worth protecting. This was everything. "Time for bed, baby," he said finally, releasing her. "Big day tomorrow." "Because I might meet Claire?" Emma asked hopefully. "Maybe not tomorrow, but soon." Lucas tucked her in, pulling the blankets up to her chin. Sweet dreams, Emma. Sweet dreams, Daddy. Lucas turned off the light and went to sit in the small living room, staring at his phone. He had Claire's number, had a dozen questions he needed to ask before Friday, had a whole fake relationship to construct from nothing. Instead, he sat in the dark and wondered if he'd just made the best decision of his life or the worst mistake he could possibly make. His phone buzzed. A text from Claire. Are you okay? I know this is overwhelming. We can still back out if you've changed your mind. Lucas stared at the message for a long time. He could back out. Could text back that he'd thought about it and it was too risky, too complicated, too much. Could return to his invisible life and hope Richard Harrington lost interest in destroying him. But he thought about Claire's face in the park, about the hope in her eyes when he'd agreed to help. He thought about Richard Harrington's casual cruelty, his assumption that everyone could be bought or intimidated. He thought about what example he wanted to set for Emma, the lesson that you fought back even when you were outmatched, or the lesson that you folded when powerful people came after you. He typed, I'm okay. Told Emma about you. She wants to meet you. And I'm not backing out. We're doing this. The response came quickly. Thank you. I won't let you regret this. Lucas hoped she was right, because Friday was coming fast, and once they stepped into that board meeting together, there would be no going back. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation that felt surreal. Wednesday morning, a courier arrived at Morrison's Hardware with a garment bag containing a suit that fit Lucas like it had been made for him, because he discovered from the note inside it had been. Claire had somehow obtained his measurements and commissioned a tailor to create something that would help him look the part of her fiancé. The charcoal gray fabric was finer than anything Lucas had ever worn, and when he tried it on that evening in his tiny bathroom, the man staring back at him in the mirror looked like someone who belonged in Claire's world. He hated how much he liked it. Thursday afternoon, Claire arranged to meet him at a small cafe in his neighborhood, away from the prying eyes of Manhattan's elite. She arrived in jeans and a simple blouse again, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking more like a graduate student than an heiress. They spent 2 hours rehearsing their story, practicing answers to questions that might come up at the board meeting. How did you propose? Claire asked, stirring her coffee absently. Lucas hadn't thought about that detail. I don't know. How do people usually propose? In my world, usually with a family ring and a choreographed moment at a 5-star restaurant, Claire said dryly. But that doesn't seem like you. No, Lucas agreed. I'm more the quiet moment type. Maybe we were walking in the park and it just felt right. That works. Simple, genuine, hard to poke holes in. Claire made a note on her phone. What about the engagement ring? Lucas looked down at her bare left hand and felt a flash of panic. I didn't even think about that. I can't afford... I know, Claire said quickly. I wasn't expecting you to buy one. I have my grandmother's ring in a safe deposit box. I can wear that. My father won't question it. He knows I always loved that ring more than the flashy ones he's tried to buy me over the years. The casual mention of flashy rings that her father bought like they were nothing made Lucas acutely aware again of the vast gulf between their worlds. But Claire seemed to sense his discomfort because she reached across the table and touched his hand. Hey, this works because we're different, not in spite of it. Your groundedness, your perspective on what matters, that's the whole point of the story. Don't try to be someone you're not. I'm not sure who I am anymore, Lucas admitted. 3 days ago, I was stocking shelves and trying to make rent. Now I'm memorizing a fake relationship timeline with a billionaire's daughter. You're someone who helps people, Claire said firmly. That hasn't changed. The circumstances are stranger than usual, but the core of who you are, that's still the same. Lucas wanted to believe her, but he felt like he was standing on increasingly unstable ground. What if I mess this up tomorrow? What if I say the wrong thing, or someone asks a question we haven't prepared for, or I just completely freeze? Then I'll cover for you, Claire said. Lucas, we're in this together. If you stumble, I catch you. If I falter, you support me. That's how partnerships work. Fake partnerships, Lucas corrected. Partnerships, Claire repeated, her voice soft but insistent. The engagement might be fake, but the alliance is real. I meant what I said about protecting you and Emma. I've already talked to the family lawyers, made sure they're prepared to defend against any custody challenges. I've also reached out to some contacts in media to control the narrative when this goes public. Lucas felt uncomfortable with how much she was doing, how quickly she'd mobilized resources he couldn't even imagine having access to. You don't have to— I do, Claire interrupted. This is how I contribute. You're giving me courage and support. I'm giving you protection and resources. It's a fair trade. Lucas wasn't sure it was fair at all, but he nodded anyway. They spent another hour going over details, establishing the rhythms of their supposed relationship, until Lucas felt like he could recite their fabricated history in his sleep. Thursday evening, Claire came to his apartment to meet Emma. Lucas had spent the afternoon stress cleaning their small space, trying to see it through Claire's eyes. The furniture was secondhand, the walls needed paint, and no amount of tidying could hide how cramped everything was. But when Claire knocked on the door and Lucas let her in, she didn't look around with judgment or pity. She simply smiled at Emma, who was peeking out from behind Lucas's legs with shy curiosity. "Hi, Emma," Claire said, crouching down to Emma's eye level. "Your dad has told me so much about you. I brought you something. I hope you like it." She pulled out a small wrapped package from her bag, and Emma looked up at Lucas for permission. He nodded, and Emma took the gift with careful hands. Inside was a beautiful illustrated book about brave girls throughout history. "Daddy says you like stories about princesses who save themselves," Claire said. "I thought you might like reading about real women who changed the world." Emma's face lit up with genuine delight, and Lucas felt something in his chest tighten. Claire had listened, had remembered, had thought about what would matter to his daughter. This wasn't just strategy or image management. This was actual kindness. "Thank you," Emma said quietly, clutching the book to her chest. "Do you want to see my drawings?" "I would love to," Claire said, and Emma took her hand and pulled her toward the small table where her art supplies were scattered. Lucas watched them from the kitchen doorway as Claire examined Emma's crayon masterpieces with genuine interest, asking questions about the purple dragon and the castle made of candy. Emma was explaining her elaborate storylines with the unselfconscious enthusiasm of childhood, and Claire was listening like every word mattered. It was supposed to be fake, Lucas reminded himself. A performance, a strategy, a temporary alliance. But watching Claire laugh at Emma's jokes and praise her creativity, Lucas felt the lines between performance and reality start to blur in ways that made him deeply uneasy. After an hour, Claire said goodbye with a promise to see Emma again soon. Emma hugged her without prompting, and Claire hugged back with a tenderness that seemed entirely genuine. "She's wonderful," Claire said quietly to Lucas at the door. "You're doing an amazing job with her." "I'm trying," Lucas said. "She makes it easy." Claire hesitated, then said, "Tomorrow is going to be intense. Are you ready?" "No," Lucas admitted, "but I'll do it anyway." "That's all anyone can ask." Claire touched his arm briefly. "I'll pick you up at noon. The meeting starts at 1, but I want time to brief you on who's going to be there, what to expect." After she left, Emma came to stand beside Lucas, still holding her new book. "I like her, Daddy. She's nice." "She is," Lucas agreed. "Are you going to marry her for real?" The question caught Lucas off guard. "I don't know, baby. We're still figuring things out." "Okay," Emma said simply, with the easy acceptance of childhood. "But I think she likes you. She smiles different when she looks at you." Lucas had no idea how to respond to that, so he just hugged his daughter and tried not to think about what it meant that even a 7-year-old could see something between them that he was trying very hard to deny existed. Friday morning arrived with ominous gray skies that matched Lucas's mood. He called in sick to Morrison's, hating the lie, but knowing he couldn't exactly explain where he'd really be, and spent the morning in a state of anxious preparation. He showered twice, shaved carefully, and tried on the new suit 3 times before he was satisfied he could wear it without looking like he was playing dress-up. Claire's car arrived exactly at noon. It wasn't the ostentatious limousine Lucas had half expected, but a sleek black sedan driven by a professional driver who nodded politely and opened the door without comment. Claire was already inside, wearing a navy dress that managed to be both professional and elegant, her hair pulled back, her grandmother's ring glinting on her left hand. "You look good," she said as Lucas slid in beside her. "The suit fits perfectly." "Thanks to you," Lucas said. "I still feel like I'm wearing a costume." You'll feel less conspicuous once we get there. Trust me, half the men at this meeting will be wearing variations of the same thing. She handed him a folder. Here's what you need to know. The board meeting is mostly procedural. Quarterly financial reports, updates on major initiatives. The foundation update comes near the end, which is when I'll introduce you. Lucas flipped through the folder, seeing names and titles and brief bios of people he'd never heard of. There are a lot of people here. 15 board members plus senior executives and some key stakeholders, about 30 people total. Claire must have seen his expression because she added, "You don't need to remember everyone, just the key players. My father, obviously, Gerald Whitmore, the senator. His son James will probably be there even though he's not on the board. Victoria Chen, she's the CFO and generally sympathetic. Marcus Webb, he runs our technology division and doesn't particularly like my father, so he might be an ally. And what do I do if someone asks me something I don't know how to answer? Defer to me. Say it's Claire's area of expertise or that you'd rather let me handle the business side while you focus on being supportive. Most people will read that as appropriate deference rather than ignorance." Claire paused, studying his face. "Lucas, you don't have to be brilliant or impressive. You just have to be genuine. That's actually the most disarming thing you can be in a room full of people who've spent their whole lives performing." The car pulled up in front of the Harrington Industries building, and Lucas felt his stomach drop. This was it. No more rehearsals, no more preparation. They were about to walk into a room full of powerful people and sell the lie that they were engaged, that they belonged together, that Lucas Reed was worthy of being Claire Harrington's future husband. Claire must have sensed his panic because she took his hand, her fingers interlacing with his. "Hey, look at me." Lucas met her eyes. "You've got this," she said firmly. "And if you don't, I've got you. We're a team, remember?" Lucas nodded, not trusting his voice. Claire squeezed his hand once more, then released it and opened her door. The driver was already there, helping her out with practiced efficiency, and Lucas followed, trying to project confidence he absolutely didn't feel. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt even longer than it had during his confrontation with Richard Harrington. Claire stood beside him, reviewing something on her phone with professional focus, and Lucas wondered how she could be so calm when his heart was trying to beat its way out of his chest. The elevator doors opened, and Margaret Torres was waiting. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw Lucas, but she recovered quickly, her professional mask sliding into place. "Miss Harrington," she said smoothly. "Mr. Harrington asked me to inform you that he'd like to speak with you before the meeting begins." "I'm sure he would," Claire said coolly. "Please tell him I'll be available after the meeting. Right now I need to prepare my presentation." Margaret's jaw tightened slightly. He was quite insistent. "And I'm quite busy," Claire replied, her voice pleasant but implacable. "After the meeting, Margaret." "Thank you." She walked past the assistant without waiting for a response, Lucas following in her wake, and he felt a spark of admiration for how completely she'd shut down what was clearly an ambush attempt. They moved through the hallways toward the main conference room, and Lucas could feel eyes following them, hear whispers starting. The conference room was massive, with windows overlooking the city and a table that could seat 20 comfortably. People were already gathering, clustered in small groups, their conversations pausing as Claire and Lucas entered together. Lucas saw Richard Harrington near the head of the table, deep in conversation with an older man who had to be Senator Whitmore based on the family resemblance to James. Both men looked up as Claire approached, and Lucas saw Richard's expression harden. "Claire," Richard said, his voice carrying across the room, "I believe we need to have a private conversation before this meeting begins." "After the meeting, Father," Claire said, leading Lucas to seats about halfway down the table. "I'm sure everyone is eager to get started." "Claire," Richard's voice sharpened. "Now." The room had gone completely quiet, everyone watching this power play unfold. Claire set her bag down deliberately, then turned to face her father with a calm that Lucas knew cost her dearly. "Father, I'm happy to discuss whatever you'd like to discuss, but not before the board meeting. This is neither the time nor the place for family matters." She gestured to Lucas. "I'd like to introduce Lucas Reed, my fiancé. Lucas, this is my father, Richard Harrington, and Senator Gerald Whitmore." The silence in the room was deafening. Lucas saw shock ripple across faces, saw James Whitmore's expression twist with anger, saw the senator's eyes narrow with calculation. But it was Richard Harrington's face that held Lucas's attention, the cold fury barely contained beneath a veneer of civility. "Your fiancée," Richard repeated, each word precisely enunciated. "Yes," Claire said simply. "We're very happy. I was planning to announce it during the Foundation update, but since you've created an opportunity, I thought I'd handle introductions now." Lucas stepped forward, extending his hand to Richard. "Mr. Harrington, it's good to see you again." Richard looked at Lucas's hand like it was something contaminated, making no move to shake it. The insult was deliberate and public, and Lucas felt heat crawl up his neck, but he kept his hand extended, forcing Richard to either accept it or be obviously rude in front of the entire board. After a beat too long, Richard grasped Lucas's hand briefly, his grip just short of painful. "Mr. Reed, how unexpected to see you here." "Claire invited me," Lucas said evenly. "I'm looking forward to learning more about the Foundation's work." "I'm sure you are," Richard said, his voice dripping with contempt that only Lucas could fully hear. "The Foundation does such important work, helping those less fortunate, providing opportunities to people who might not otherwise have them. Though I suppose you have personal experience with that now." The barb was clear, but Lucas refused to rise to it. "I think everyone can benefit from opportunities, regardless of their background. That's what makes the Foundation's mission so valuable." "Indeed." Richard released Lucas's hand and turned to Claire. "We'll discuss this after the meeting, both of you." "Looking forward to it," Claire said, her voice steady despite the visible tension in her shoulders. Richard moved away to take his seat at the head of the table, and the room slowly came back to life, conversations resuming in hushed tones. Lucas could feel people staring, could imagine the speculation and gossip already forming, but Claire touched his arm gently and guided him to their seats. "You did great," she murmured as they sat down. "He didn't shake my hand," Lucas said quietly. "He did, eventually. And more importantly, you didn't back down." Claire opened her portfolio, shuffling papers with hands that trembled slightly. "That matters." The meeting began with procedural matters that Lucas barely followed. Financial reports were presented, initiatives were discussed, and the board members engaged in the kind of corporate speak that made Lucas's head spin. He tried to focus, tried to understand what was being said, but mostly he was just aware of the weight of attention on him, the speculation in people's eyes every time they glanced his way. About 45 minutes into the meeting, Victoria Chen, the CFO Claire had mentioned, presented the quarterly report on the Harrington Foundation. Lucas forced himself to pay attention as she outlined programs funded, communities served, impact metrics achieved. "And now," Victoria said, glancing at Claire, "I'll turn it over to Claire Harrington, who oversees our strategic development initiatives, for an update on some exciting new directions for the Foundation." Claire stood, moving to the front of the room with the confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times. She pulled up a presentation on the large screen and began walking through plans to expand the Foundation's educational programs into underserved communities. Lucas watched her transform. This wasn't the desperate woman who'd grabbed his arm at the gala or the vulnerable person who'd sat on the fountain asking for help. This was Vice President Claire Harrington, commanding the room with intelligence and passion, speaking about education access and opportunity gaps with the kind of conviction that came from genuine caring rather than corporate obligation. "We've identified 12 schools in neighborhoods where traditional educational resources are limited," Claire was saying, pulling up a map on the screen. "Our proposal is to create comprehensive after-school programs that don't just provide tutoring, but also arts education, mentorship, and college preparation. We're calling it the Opportunity Initiative, and we believe it could serve as a model for foundation programs nationwide." "What's the projected cost?" one of the board members asked. "Initial investment of $15 million over 3 years, with the expectation that we'll see measurable improvements in graduation rates, college enrollment, and community engagement." Claire pulled up more data. "But beyond the numbers, this is about dignity. It's about telling children in struggling neighborhoods that they matter, that their potential deserves investment, that we see them as more than statistics or charity cases." Lucas felt something shift in his chest as he listened to her speak. This wasn't just a presentation. This was Claire's actual passion, her real values on display. He thought about Emma's school, about the kids he saw every day struggling with inadequate resources, and he understood why Claire had been so desperate to escape her father's control. She wanted to do something meaningful, and Richard only saw the foundation as a tax write-off and PR opportunity. "I think it's a waste of resources," a voice said from the end of the table. Lucas looked over to see James Whitmore leaning back in his chair with calculated insolence. $15 million for after-school programs? We could get better ROI investing that in charter schools or scholarship programs for high-achieving students. "The ROI isn't just financial," Claire said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "It's social impact, community building, breaking cycles of poverty. Not everything has to generate profit to be worthwhile." "Says the woman who's never had to worry about profit," James shot back. "Some of us understand that charitable foundations still need to be strategic about resource allocation." "I'm sorry," Claire said coolly. "I wasn't aware you had extensive experience with foundation operations, James. When did you join the board?" "I'm here as my father's guest," James said, "but I've been consulting on public-private partnerships for education reform. I know something about what works and what's just feel-good spending. Then you should know that research consistently shows comprehensive community programs have better long-term outcomes than selective programs that only help a few high achievers," Claire countered. "We're not abandoning excellence. We're expanding access to it." Lucas could see the tension between them escalating, could feel the room's discomfort as what should have been a professional disagreement took on personal overtones. He found himself speaking before he'd consciously decided to. "Excuse me," he said, his voice quiet but clear in the conference room. "I don't mean to interrupt, but I think I might have some relevant perspective here." Every head turned toward him. Claire looked surprised, but nodded encouragingly. Richard Harrington's expression could have frozen water. Lucas stood, his heart pounding, acutely aware that he was the least qualified person in this room to speak about anything. But he thought about Emma, about her classmates, about Mrs. Martinez, who taught second grade with supplies she bought out of her own meager salary. "My daughter attends PS 147, Lucas said, one of the schools Claire mentioned for the Opportunity Initiative. And I can tell you that the kids there don't need more selectivity or competition. They need support. They need adults who show up consistently and believe they're worth investing in. They need programs that meet them where they are, not programs that only reward the ones who've already figured out how to succeed despite the odds." He paused, gathering his thoughts, trying to find the words for what he wanted to say. "I grew up in a neighborhood like the ones Claire's talking about. I was a smart kid, but I didn't have anyone telling me I could go to college, or how to apply, or that my dreams were possible. I had teachers who were overwhelmed and a school system that was underfunded. And you know what? I turned out fine. I work hard. I take care of my daughter. I'm a decent person. But I also wonder sometimes who I might have become if someone had invested in my potential the way you all had people investing in yours." The room was completely silent now. Lucas felt exposed, vulnerable, every word revealing exactly how much he didn't belong here, but he pressed on. "The kids at PS 147 deserve better than fine. They deserve excellent. And programs like what Claire's proposing, they're not waste. They're the difference between a child believing they have a future and a child giving up before they're even 10 years old. That's not feel-good spending. That's basic human dignity." He sat down, his face burning, unable to look at anyone. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Victoria Chen spoke. "I think Lucas makes an excellent point," she said firmly. "The Foundation's mission isn't about ROI in traditional terms. It's about impact, and everything Claire has presented suggests significant positive impact potential." "I agree," said Marcus Webb, the technology division head. "And frankly, I'm tired of treating education as another market sector to optimize. Claire's proposal is exactly the kind of bold, values-driven initiative the Foundation should be known for." Richard Harrington's voice cut through the growing murmurs of support. "This is a board meeting, not a public forum for anecdotal emotional appeals. Mr. Reed's personal history, while touching, is irrelevant to strategic planning." "Is it?" Claire said, her voice sharp. "Or is it exactly the kind of perspective we need when making decisions about programs meant to help actual human beings? Lucas understands the communities we're trying to serve in a way that quarterly reports and impact metrics can't capture." "Lucas," Richard said, turning the name into something dismissive, "has no education in nonprofit management, no experience with large-scale program implementation, and no qualifications to speak to this board about Foundation strategy. He has lived experience, Claire shot back. He has authenticity, and he has the courage to speak truth to a room full of people who've spent their whole lives insulated from the realities he's describing. Those qualifications seem pretty valuable to me. Father and daughter stared at each other across the conference table, and Lucas could feel decades of conflict and control issues playing out in that single moment. The rest of the board seemed frozen, unsure whether to intervene or watch the family drama unfold. Senator Whitmore cleared his throat. Perhaps we should table this discussion for now and move forward with the agenda. Claire, your proposal will need more detailed review before any funding decisions are made. I'm sure you understand. Of course, Claire said, her voice tight. I'll prepare additional materials for the next quarterly meeting. She gathered her papers and returned to her seat beside Lucas, her hands shaking slightly as she shuffled documents back into her portfolio. Under the table, Lucas reached over and squeezed her hand briefly. She looked at him, and he saw gratitude and frustration warring in her expression. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, but Lucas barely heard any of it. He was too busy replaying his impromptu speech, wondering if he'd helped or hurt Claire's cause, feeling the weight of Richard Harrington's contempt and the speculation in every other pair of eyes. When the meeting finally adjourned, people began gathering their things and forming small groups for continued discussion. Several board members approached Claire with words of support or questions about the Opportunity Initiative, and Lucas stood awkwardly beside her, trying to look like he belonged. Victoria Chen was one of the first to approach. Claire, that was an excellent presentation. And Lucas? She turned to him with a warm smile. Thank you for sharing your perspective. It's rare to hear that kind of honesty in these meetings. Thank you, Lucas said, unsure if he was being sincere or patronized. I mean it, Victoria continued. We get so caught up in metrics and strategies that we forget we're talking about real children, real communities. Your reminder of what's actually at stake, that was valuable. Marcus Webb joined them, extending his hand to Lucas. Marcus Webb, I run the technology division. I'd like to hear more about your thoughts on the educational gaps you experienced. We've been exploring ways to bring technology resources into underserved schools, and your perspective might be useful. Lucas shook his hand, bemused by the genuine interest in Marcus's tone. I'm happy to share whatever might be helpful, though I'm not sure I have any expertise. Experience is a kind of expertise, Marcus said, often the most valuable kind. They talked for a few more minutes before Richard Harrington's voice cut through the conversation. Claire, Lucas, my office, now. It wasn't a request. Claire's jaw tightened, but she nodded to Victoria and Marcus. Excuse us, we'll continue this conversation later. Lucas followed Claire through the hallways toward Richard's office, dread building with each step. When they reached the door, Richard was already inside, standing by the windows with his back to them, his posture radiating barely controlled anger. Close the door, he said without turning around. Claire closed it, and the three of them stood in tense silence for a long moment. When Richard finally turned to face them, his expression was colder than Lucas had ever seen it. I gave you a chance to end this quietly, Richard said to Claire. I offered Mr. Reed a generous exit. You both chose to escalate instead. So now we're going to have a very frank conversation about consequences. We're engaged, Father, Claire said firmly. That's not escalation. That's my life, my choice. Your choice, Richard repeated mockingly. You're 28 years old, Claire. You've never made a major decision without my guidance. You've never had to navigate the real world, face real consequences, manage real responsibilities. And now you think you're ready to choose a husband, to bind yourself to a man with nothing to offer except poverty and limitation? He has integrity, Claire said. He has compassion. He has the courage to stand up for what he believes in even when it costs him. Those seem like pretty valuable qualities in a partner. Richard's laugh was bitter. Integrity doesn't pay bills. Compassion doesn't build empires. And courage without resources is just foolish defiance. He turned his cold gaze to Lucas. Tell her, Mr. Reed. Tell her what happens when integrity meets reality. Tell her about the jobs you've lost, the debts you can't pay, the future you can't provide for your own daughter. Tell her what your courage has actually accomplished. Lucas felt each word like a physical blow, but he kept his voice steady. I've provided Emma with love, stability, and values. That's what matters. Love doesn't keep the lights on, Richard said dismissively. Stability isn't living paycheck to paycheck. And values, he spat the word like it was obscene. Values are luxuries for people who can afford them. You're drowning, Mr. Reed, and now you want to drag my daughter down with you. I'm not dragging her anywhere, Lucas said. She asked for my help. I gave it. And what happens when helping her costs you everything? Richard demanded. When you lose your job, your apartment, custody of your daughter, will your integrity comfort you then? Will your courage pay for a lawyer when Emma is placed with a family that can actually provide for her? The threat was explicit now, and Lucas felt cold terror wash through him. You wouldn't. I would do whatever is necessary to protect my family, Richard said flatly. And right now, protecting my family means removing you from Claire's life by any means necessary. Father, stop, Claire said, her voice shaking with anger. You can't threaten Lucas like this. It's illegal, it's cruel, and it won't work. Won't it? Richard turned his attention back to his daughter. Claire, you've lived your entire life in comfort and security. You have no concept of what real hardship looks like. But Mr. Reed does. He knows exactly what he stands to lose. So let me make this very simple for both of you. He moved to his desk and pulled out a document, sliding it across to them. This is a contract. Mr. Reed signs it, agrees to end this charade immediately, and receives $2 million deposited into an account of his choosing. He signs a non-disclosure agreement, agrees to have no further contact with Claire, and everyone moves on with their lives. $2 million, Lucas said quietly. Double my previous offer in recognition of the inconvenience I've caused you, Richard said. Enough to secure your daughter's future, pay off every debt, and live comfortably for years. All you have to do is walk away. Lucas stared at the document, seeing numbers that represented everything he'd failed to provide for Emma, every opportunity he'd been unable to give her, every worry that kept him awake at night. $2 million. Emma could go to any college she wanted. They could move to a safe neighborhood with good schools. He could stop struggling, stop failing, stop feeling like he was constantly one disaster away from losing everything. And if I don't sign, he asked. Then I destroy you, Richard said simply. I make one phone call and you lose your job at Morrison's Hardware. I make another and every potential employer in this city knows you're unemployable. I contact Child Protective Services with concerns about your ability to care for Emma. I ensure that every aspect of your life becomes so difficult, so painful, that you'll beg me to let you sign this contract. Lucas felt Claire's hand find his, her fingers interlacing with his in a gesture of solidarity. He looked at her and saw fury and fear and determination all mixed together in her expression. Don't sign it, she said quietly. Whatever he threatens, we'll fight it together. I have lawyers, resources. I can protect you. Can you protect Emma? Lucas asked, and he heard his voice break on his daughter's name. If he goes after custody, if he makes it look like I'm unfit, can you stop that? Claire hesitated, and Lucas saw the truth in her eyes. She didn't know. For all her resources and connections, she couldn't guarantee Emma's safety from her father's vindictiveness. Lucas, Richard said, his voice almost gentle now, you're a good father. I can see that. You love your daughter. You want what's best for her, so prove it. Sign the contract, take the money, give Emma the future she deserves instead of the struggle you're offering her. Lucas looked down at the contract, at the obscene number of zeros, at the promise of everything he'd ever wanted for his daughter. He thought about Emma's face that morning, her excitement about maybe having a new friend in Claire, her simple faith that her daddy would take care of everything. He thought about the man he wanted Emma to grow up knowing, the values he wanted to instill in her, the example he wanted to set. He thought about Claire's desperate eyes at the gala, her courage in standing up to her father publicly, her genuine care when she'd met Emma. He thought about integrity and what it actually cost. Then he looked up at Richard Harrington and said, very clearly, no. The word hung in the air like a challenge, simple and absolute. Richard Harrington's expression shifted from confidence to disbelief, as if Lucas had spoken in a language he couldn't comprehend. Excuse me? Richard said, his voice dangerously quiet. I said no, Lucas repeated, pushing the contract back across the desk. I'm not signing it. I'm not taking your money, and I'm not walking away from Claire. Richard's face darkened with fury, You're making the biggest mistake of your life. Maybe, Lucas said, standing up, Claire rising beside him, but it's my mistake to make, and I'd rather make it with my integrity intact than sell it for $2 million. Your integrity, Richard said with contempt. Let's see how much your integrity is worth when you're living on the street and fighting for supervised visitation with your daughter. Claire stepped forward, placing herself between Lucas and her father. If you go after Lucas or Emma, I will make it my personal mission to expose every questionable business practice, every ethical shortcut, every dirty deal you've ever made. I've worked in this company for 6 years, Father. I know where the bodies are buried. Don't test me. Richard stared at his daughter with something that might have been respect if it hadn't been so cold. You would destroy your own family's company? Ruin your own inheritance? I would burn it all down before I let you hurt innocent people to maintain control over my life, Claire said, and Lucas heard absolute conviction in her voice. I'm done being your asset to manage. I'm done watching you crush anyone who doesn't serve your interests. And I'm done pretending that your version of success is worth the cost you demand from everyone around you. You ungrateful. I'm grateful for the opportunities I've had, Claire interrupted. I'm grateful for the education, the resources, the platform to do meaningful work. But I'm not grateful for the control, the manipulation, the assumption that my life is just another business deal for you to negotiate. That ends now. Father and daughter faced each other across the desk, and Lucas could see 3 decades of dysfunction and power struggles crystallizing in this single moment. He wanted to step in, to diffuse the tension, but he understood instinctively that this was Claire's battle to fight, her liberation to claim. If you walk out of here with him, Richard said slowly, you're choosing a side. And once that choice is made, there's no going back. Good, Claire said. I'm tired of living in the middle, trying to please you while maintaining some shred of myself. I choose Lucas. I choose honesty. I choose a life where people matter more than profit margins. Then you're a fool, Richard said flatly. And when this all falls apart, when reality crashes down on your idealistic fantasy, don't come crying to me for rescue. I won't, Claire promised. She turned to Lucas and took his hand. Let's go. They walked toward the door, but Richard's voice stopped them one last time. Claire, if you leave now, I will remove you from your position. I will cut your access to Foundation resources. I will make sure you understand exactly what it means to defy me. Claire turned back, and Lucas saw tears in her eyes, but her voice was steady. Do what you need to do, Father. But understand something. You've already lost me. You lost me years ago when you stopped seeing me as your daughter and started seeing me as a chess piece. This is just me finally admitting it. She walked out, Lucas beside her, and this time Richard didn't call them back. The elevator ride down was silent, Claire staring straight ahead, her hand still gripping Lucas's with almost painful intensity. It wasn't until they reached the lobby and stepped out into the late afternoon sunlight that she finally broke. She stopped on the sidewalk, her breathing ragged, and Lucas pulled her into his arms without thinking. She collapsed against his chest, her whole body shaking with silent sobs, and Lucas held her while passers-by flowed around them like water around stones. I just burned every bridge, Claire said against his shoulder, her voice muffled. I just destroyed my relationship with my father, probably lost my job, definitely lost access to everything I've been working on for years. What did I just do? You chose yourself, Lucas said quietly, one hand stroking her hair. You chose freedom over control. That took more courage than anything I've ever done. It doesn't feel courageous, Claire said, pulling back to look at him with red-rimmed eyes. It feels terrifying. What if he's right? What if I can't make it without the family resources? What if I just threw away everything for a principle? Then we figure it out, Lucas said. Together. That was the deal, remember? We're in this as partners. Claire laughed, but it was a broken sound. Some partnership. I've dragged you into a war with one of the most powerful men in Manhattan, cost you your peace of mind, threatened your custody of Emma, and I can't even guarantee I'll have the resources to help you fight back. You should walk away, Lucas, seriously. Take whatever settlement he's willing to offer and get yourself and Emma somewhere safe. No, Lucas said simply. Why not? Claire demanded, frustration and fear making her voice sharp. Why are you still here? You've seen what my father is capable of. You know what he'll do to you. Why won't you just save yourself? Lucas took both her hands, making her look at him. Because saving myself means abandoning you, and I don't do that. Because Emma is watching how I handle this, and I want to teach her that you don't walk away from people who need you just because it's hard. Because... He paused, realizing the truth of what he was about to say. Because you matter to me, Claire. This stopped being about helping a stranger days ago. You matter, and I'm not walking away from that. Claire stared at him, tears streaming down her face. We barely know each other. I know, Lucas said. But I know you're brave and kind, and you genuinely care about making the world better. I know you love your work with the foundation, and you hate the corporate games your father plays. I know you read to Emma like every word of her stories matters, and you treated my tiny apartment like it was just as valid as your penthouse. That's enough to know I want to keep knowing more. Claire made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. This is insane. We're supposed to be fake engaged, not actually developing feelings. I know, Lucas said again. I'm terrible at following the plan. She kissed him then, sudden and desperate and real, her hands coming up to frame his face as she pressed her lips to his with an intensity that took his breath away. Lucas froze for a split second, shocked, before his body caught up with his mind and he was kissing her back, one hand tangling in her hair, the other pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Claire rested her forehead against his. That was really stupid, she whispered. Probably, Lucas agreed, his heart racing. We're supposed to be pretending. I know. This complicates everything. I know. Claire pulled back just far enough to meet his eyes. But I'm not sorry. Me neither, Lucas admitted. They stood there on the sidewalk. Former strangers turned reluctant allies, turned something undefined and terrifying, and Lucas felt the ground shift beneath him in ways that had nothing to do with Richard Harrington's threats and everything to do with the woman in his arms. Claire's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. She pulled it out, read the screen, and her expression hardened. It's Margaret. My father has officially terminated my employment, effective immediately. Building security has been instructed to deny me access. My corporate email has been disabled. She scrolled through more messages. Victoria Chen texted. Apparently the board is in emergency session to discuss my replacement as VP of Strategic Development. That was fast, Lucas said. My father doesn't wait, Claire said bitterly. And he makes examples out of people who defy him. She looked up at Lucas, fear creeping back into her expression. He'll come after you next, probably tonight. Lucas, you need to prepare. Prepare how? Get everything in order for Emma. Contact information for her school, medical records, anything Child Protective Services might ask for if they investigate. Call your landlord, make sure the rent is current. Document your employment history, your income. Create a paper trail that shows you're a stable, responsible parent. Claire was pacing now, her strategic mind shifting into crisis mode. I still have access to the family lawyers. I'll call them, get someone assigned to your case immediately. If he tries to question your custody, we'll be ready. Claire, stop, Lucas said gently. Breathe. I can't breathe, Claire said, her voice rising with panic. He's going to destroy you, and it's my fault. I should have just married James, should have played along like I always do. Now you're going to lose everything because I was selfish. Hey! Lucas caught her hand, stopping her pacing. Look at me. You're not selfish, you're brave. And whatever comes next, we'll face it together. But right now, you need to breathe. Claire took a shuddering breath, then another, slowly calming. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Me too, Lucas said. But being scared doesn't mean we're wrong. It just means what we're doing matters. Claire nodded, still trembling but more centered. Okay. First things first. I need to secure the lawyer. Then we need to talk to Emma, prepare her for whatever might happen. And we need to move fast because my father... She stopped, her expression shifting to something Lucas couldn't read. Actually, maybe we approach this differently. What do you mean? Claire's eyes were distant, calculating. My father's strength is his control over information and resources. He threatened you because he assumes you're vulnerable, that you don't have support or leverage. But what if we take that assumption away? What if we go public with this whole thing before he can shape the narrative? Public how? Media. Claire said, her voice gaining confidence. I have contacts at several major publications. We give them the story, the real story. Billionaire's daughter falls for single father, chooses love over family approval, gets fired for refusing arranged marriage. It's the kind of human interest piece that goes viral. And once it's out there, once public sympathy is on our side, it becomes much harder for my father to quietly destroy you. Lucas felt uncomfortable with the idea of their lives becoming entertainment, but he could see the strategic logic. You want to use the press against him. I want to level the playing field, Claire corrected. My father operates in shadows, through back channels and subtle pressure. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. We shine a light on what he's doing, and suddenly he has to be careful about his next moves. And if the press twists the story, makes me look like a gold digger or you look like a rebellious heiress? We control the narrative by telling it first, Claire said. We frame it as a story about integrity versus manipulation, about choosing authenticity over convenience. We make sure the sympathetic version is the one that gets told. She pulled out her phone. I know a reporter at the Times who's done several pieces on corporate ethics and family dynasties. She's fair, thorough, and she hates my father because he tried to kill a story she wrote about Harrington Industries' labor practices 3 years ago. She'll listen to us. Lucas thought about Emma reading about her father in the newspaper, about his private life becoming public consumption, about the loss of anonymity that had been his greatest protection. But he also thought about Richard Harrington's threats, about the quiet destruction that would come if they did nothing. Okay, he said, but we're honest, completely honest. We tell them the engagement started as a performance but became real. We don't lie about how we met or why. If we're going to do this, we do it with integrity. Claire nodded slowly. Agreed. Total honesty, no manipulation, just facts. She was already dialing, her fingers moving with decisive purpose. Sarah? It's Claire Harrington. I have a story for you, and you're going to want to sit down for this. 20 minutes later, they were sitting in a coffee shop 3 blocks from Harrington Industries, across from Sarah Chen, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with a recorder on the table between them and an expression that suggested she'd heard everything and believed very little. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Sarah said, reviewing her notes. You, Claire Harrington, grabbed this man, Lucas Reed, at a charity gala 1 week ago and asked him to pretend to be your husband to escape pressure from your father to marry Senator Whitmore's son. Correct, Claire said, and you, Mr. Reed, agreed to this despite being a complete stranger with no apparent benefit to yourself. She needed help, Lucas said simply. Uh-huh. Sarah's skepticism was palpable. And then this fake relationship somehow became real enough that you just walked away from your job at Harrington Industries and your father threatened to destroy Mr. Reed here unless he signed an NDA and accepted $2 million to disappear. That's accurate, Claire confirmed. And you refused the money, Sarah said to Lucas. Yes. Why? Lucas met her eyes. Because my daughter is watching. And I can't teach her that everything has a price if I'm selling my principles for $2 million. Sarah studied him for a long moment, and Lucas felt like he was being dissected by her gaze. Finally, she leaned back and turned off her recorder. Off the record for a minute, she said. I've been covering Richard Harrington for a decade. He's ruthless, vindictive, and has crushed better-positioned people than you for much less. If I write this story, it's going to bring you attention you're not prepared for. Media camped outside your apartment, strangers with opinions about your life, trolls on social media questioning everything about you. Is that really what you want? No, Lucas said honestly. But I want my father coming after my daughter even less. At least if this is public, he has to be careful about how he moves. Sarah nodded slowly, then looked at Claire. And you're prepared to permanently damage your relationship with your family? Because there's no coming back from this. Once I publish, you're the defiant heiress who chose love over money. That's a powerful narrative, but it locks you into a role you might not want long-term. I'm prepared, Claire said. I'm tired of the role I've been playing. Maybe this new one will fit better. Sarah studied them both, her expression unreadable. Then she turned her recorder back on. Okay, let's start from the beginning. Claire, tell me about the night of the gala. They talked for over 2 hours, walking Sarah through everything. The desperate grab at the ballroom, the confrontation with Richard, the decision to commit to the fake engagement, The board meeting, the ultimatum. Lucas was brutally honest about his financial struggles, his failures, his fears about losing Emma. Claire was equally candid about her father's controlling behavior, the pressure to marry James Whitmore, her frustration with being treated like corporate property. Sarah asked sharp questions, probed for inconsistencies, clearly trying to determine if they were lying or exaggerating, but she also listened with what seemed like genuine interest, occasionally making notes that weren't just factual, but observational. "One last question," Sarah said as they neared the end. "This engagement, when exactly did it stop being fake for you both?" Claire and Lucas looked at each other. Lucas thought about Claire reading to Emma, about her genuine passion in the boardroom, about the way she'd stood up to her father knowing it would cost her everything. "I'm not sure it was ever completely fake," Lucas said quietly. "From the first moment, there was something real about it. The fear in her eyes, the courage it took to ask for help, the trust she placed in a stranger. The engagement might have been performance, but the connection was always genuine." "For me," Claire said, "it was when Lucas refused my father's first offer. Everyone in my life has a price. Everyone can be bought or intimidated or manipulated. But Lucas just said no, like it was simple, like integrity wasn't negotiable. That's when I knew this was different, that he was different." Sarah made a final note, then turned off her recorder. "I'll have a draft by tomorrow morning. I'll send it to you both for fact-checking, but I won't change the narrative or soften anything based on your feedback. Just correct factual errors. This runs in Sunday's paper if my editor approves. That gives you about 36 hours before this becomes very, very public. Use that time to prepare." They thanked her and left the coffee shop as evening was settling over Manhattan. Lucas checked his phone and saw 3 missed calls from Mrs. Chen and a text. "Emma is asking for you. Is everything okay?" Reality crashed back in. Lucas had been so consumed with board meetings and confrontations and press interviews that he'd lost track of time. Emma was waiting for him, probably worried, definitely confused about why Daddy was late. "I need to get home," Lucas said to Claire. "Emma?" "Go," Claire said immediately. "I'll call the lawyer, get everything set up for tomorrow. You take care of your daughter." Lucas hesitated, looking at her standing on the sidewalk, and suddenly the enormity of what she'd given up hit him. "Where are you going to go?" "If your father cut your access, I have my own place," Claire said. "A condo I bought with my own money 2 years ago. He can't touch it." "I'll be fine, Lucas. I'm more worried about you and Emma." "We'll be okay," Lucas said, hoping it was true. "Call me if you need anything." "Same," Claire said. Then, impulsively, she kissed him again, brief and sweet and promising things neither of them had time to explore right now. "Go be with your daughter. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." Lucas took the subway home in a daze, his mind spinning with everything that had happened. He'd refused $2 million. He'd stood up to one of the most powerful men in Manhattan. He'd kissed Claire Harrington and meant it. He'd agreed to make their fake engagement public and real simultaneously. He was either the bravest man alive or the biggest fool, and he honestly wasn't sure which. Mrs. Chen met him at the door, Emma hovering behind her. Lucas, thank goodness, Emma was getting worried. "I'm so sorry," Lucas said, kneeling down so he was eye level with his daughter. "Daddy had some grown-up business that took longer than expected. I should have called." Emma threw her arms around his neck. "I thought maybe you weren't coming back." The words pierced Lucas's heart. "Baby, I will always come back to you. Always. No matter what happens, you're the most important thing in my life." After Mrs. Chen left, Lucas made Emma dinner and tried to act normal while his mind raced with everything he needed to prepare for. As Emma ate her mac and cheese, chattering about her day at school, Lucas made mental lists of documents to gather, people to call, worst-case scenarios to plan for. "Daddy, you're not listening," Emma said, pulling him back to the present. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Tell me again about what happened at recess." Emma studied him with 7-year-old intensity. "Are you in trouble?" "What makes you say that?" "You have your worried face, the one you get when the bills come." Lucas smiled despite everything. His daughter was too perceptive for her own good. "Daddy has some complicated grown-up stuff going on, but I'm handling it, and you don't need to worry." "Is it because of Claire?" "Some of it is related to Claire, yes." Emma considered this, swirling her fork through cheese sauce. "I like Claire. She's nice." "She is nice," Lucas agreed. "Are you going to marry her for real?" The question caught Lucas off guard. I don't know, baby. We're still figuring things out. But you like her, right? You smile different when you talk about her. Lucas thought about that kiss on the sidewalk, about the way his heart had raced when Claire had walked into his life and refused to leave it. Yeah, he admitted. I like her. Good, Emma said simply. You should be happy, Daddy. Lucas felt his throat tighten with emotion. Here he was, worried about custody and media and Richard Harrington's vengeance, and his daughter was worried about whether he was happy. I am happy, sweetheart, especially when I'm with you. That night, after Emma was asleep, Lucas sat at his small kitchen table and gathered every document he could find: birth certificates, school records, medical files, pay stubs, his lease agreement. He organized them into folders, creating a paper trail of responsible parenting that could withstand scrutiny. His phone rang. Claire. How's Emma? She asked without preamble. Worried that I'm in trouble, but trying not to show it, Lucas said. How are you? Weird, Claire admitted. I've never been fired before. I keep almost calling my assistant to schedule things, then remembering I don't have an assistant anymore, or an office, or a job. I'm sorry. Don't be. I chose this. And honestly, Claire laughed and it sounded almost free. It's terrifying, but also kind of liberating. I've been living my life according to my father's expectations for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just choose, even if I'm choosing chaos and uncertainty. Chaos and uncertainty are underrated, Lucas said. Says the man who's been living with them for years. Exactly. I'm an expert. They talked for another hour, sometimes about logistics and planning, sometimes about nothing important at all. Lucas told her about Emma's questions, and Claire told him about the condo she'd bought, a modest 2-bedroom in Brooklyn that her father had never even visited because it wasn't in the right neighborhood. I should let you sleep, Claire said finally, though she sounded reluctant. Tomorrow's going to be intense. Claire, Lucas said before she could hang up. Thank you for everything. For trusting me, for standing up to your father, for being willing to risk everything for a principle. That takes courage I'm not sure I have. You have it, Claire said softly. You've been showing it every day in every choice you make. You just don't recognize it because it's so much a part of who you are. After they hung up, Lucas sat in the quiet apartment and let himself acknowledge what he'd been trying not to admit. He was falling for Claire Harrington, not the vice president or the heiress or the woman who could access resources he couldn't imagine. Just Claire, brave and flawed and trying desperately to find a way to be good in a world that rewarded ruthlessness. The next morning, Lucas called Mr. Morrison before his shift started. Sir, I need to give you a heads up about something. There's going to be a story in the Sunday Times about me and, well, it's complicated, but I wanted you to hear it from me first rather than read about it in the paper. There was a long pause. What kind of story, Lucas? Lucas explained as briefly as he could. The gala, Claire, the fake engagement that had become real, Richard Harrington's threats. He left out some details, but gave Mr. Morrison enough to understand what was coming. Huh, Mr. Morrison said when Lucas finished. That's quite a situation you've gotten yourself into. I know, sir, and I understand if you need to let me go. I don't want to bring problems to your business. Another pause. You're a good worker, Lucas. Honest, reliable, good with customers. I don't much care what the papers say or who you're dating. You show up Monday morning, you've still got a job. Understood? Lucas felt overwhelming relief. Yes, sir. Thank you. Though I will say, Mr. Morrison added, a smile in his voice, you've got more spine than I gave you credit for. Standing up to a billionaire, that takes guts. Saturday passed in a haze of preparation and anxiety. The lawyer Claire had arranged, a sharp woman named Patricia Alvarez, came by Lucas's apartment to review his documentation and prepare him for potential custody challenges. She was blunt about the risks, but also confident they could defend against anything Richard Harrington threw at them. Your record is clean, your daughter is clearly loved and cared for, and you have steady employment, Patricia said. Would it help if you had more money? Sure. But poverty isn't abuse, and the courts know that. If Harrington tries to challenge custody based solely on financial status, we'll fight it, and we'll win. Emma spent the day with Mrs. Chen, blissfully unaware of the storm about to break. Claire texted updates throughout the day. Sarah's draft had been approved, the story would run in tomorrow's print edition, and go online at midnight. She'd prepared statements for follow-up questions. At 11:30 Saturday night, Lucas sat on his couch with his laptop open, refreshing the New York Times homepage. Claire was on video call on his phone, doing the same thing from her condo. 30 seconds, Claire said, her voice tight with nerves. We can still pull it, Lucas offered, even though he knew they'd passed the point of no return days ago. No, Claire said. We're doing this. We're telling the truth. That matters more than being comfortable. At exactly midnight, the homepage refreshed. And there it was. Harrington heiress chooses love over fortune, inside the romance that defied Manhattan's most powerful dynasty. Lucas clicked through, his heart pounding, and began to read. Sarah Chen had written beautifully, capturing the essence of their story without sensationalizing it. She'd presented Claire as someone fighting for autonomy rather than a spoiled rich girl rebelling. She'd portrayed Lucas as a devoted father making impossible choices rather than an opportunist. And she'd framed Richard Harrington as exactly what he was, a controlling patriarch who saw people as assets to manage. The article included quotes from their interview, details about the board meeting, and Lucas's impromptu speech, and a clear timeline of events that made Richard's threats and manipulation impossible to deny. It was fair, thorough, and devastatingly sympathetic to Claire and Lucas. It's good, Lucas said quietly, still reading. It's really good. It's terrifying, Claire countered. But yeah, it's good. They read in silence for a few more minutes. Then Claire said, Lucas, check Twitter. It's already trending. Lucas pulled up his phone's browser and navigated to Twitter, where hashtag Harrington Love Story was climbing the trending list. People were sharing the article, commenting on the romance, expressing outrage at Richard Harrington's behavior. Some were cynical, some were supportive, but everyone was talking about it. We just made our relationship national news, Lucas said, somewhat stunned. International, probably, by morning, Claire said. The Times has global reach. Emma's going to see this. Kids at school are going to talk. I know. Claire's voice was heavy with guilt. I'm sorry, Lucas. I didn't think through how this would affect her. It's done now, Lucas said. We deal with it. Together. They stayed on the call for another hour, watching the story spread across social media, reading reactions, bracing for whatever came next. Finally, around 2 a.m, Claire said, We should try to sleep. Tomorrow's going to be worse. She was right. Sunday morning brought reporters camped outside Lucas's building and Claire's condo. Lucas's phone rang constantly with numbers he didn't recognize. Journalists requesting interviews, strangers wanting to share opinions, distant acquaintances suddenly interested in his life. He turned it off and focused on Emma, explaining as gently as he could that some people might want to talk to them about Daddy and Claire, but they should just ignore anyone they didn't know. Emma took it with remarkable calm, more fascinated by the concept of being in the newspaper than worried about the implications. Are we famous now, Daddy? Kind of, Lucas admitted. For a little while. But it'll blow over. He hoped that was true. By Monday morning, the story had been picked up by every major news outlet. Lucas left for work early, using the back entrance to avoid the 2 reporters still lingering out front. At Morrison's Hardware, he found Mr. Morrison behind the counter reading the Times article. Quite a story, the older man said, folding the paper. You didn't mention you were dating Manhattan royalty. It's complicated, Lucas said. I imagine it is. Mr. Morrison handed him a cup of coffee. How's your daughter handling all this? Better than I am, honestly. Kids are resilient. They are. Mr. Morrison was quiet for a moment, then said, I got a call on Friday afternoon. Man wouldn't give his name, but he had that corporate voice, smooth, professional, threatening without being explicit. Said he'd heard I had an employee who might be unreliable, suggested I might want to reconsider his employment before there were problems. Lucas felt his stomach drop. Mr. Morrison, I told him I judge my employees by their work, not by gossip, and hung up, Mr. Morrison interrupted. Then I called my lawyer, had him send a letter to Harrington Industries informing them that any further attempts to interfere with my business would be considered harassment. Haven't heard back since. Lucas stared at his boss with something like awe. You didn't have to do that. Of course I did. Can't let rich bullies push around good people. Mr. Morrison smiled. Besides, this is the most exciting thing to happen in this hardware store in 40 years. I'm enjoying the drama. The week that followed was surreal. The story continued to dominate social media and news cycles. Supporters sent messages of encouragement. Critics questioned Lucas's motives and Claire's judgment. Think pieces were written about wealth inequality, arranged marriages in modern society, the price of integrity. Richard Harrington issued a terse statement through his publicist. This is a private family matter that has been sensationalized by the media. I have no further comment. But Lucas knew the lack of public response didn't mean Richard had given up. It meant he was regrouping, planning his next move. On Wednesday, Patricia Alvarez called with news. Child Protective Services received an anonymous complaint about Emma's living conditions. They want to do a home visit. Lucas felt cold fear wash over him. When? Tomorrow afternoon. I'll be there with you. Don't panic. This is exactly what we expected. We're prepared. The home visit was one of the most humiliating experiences of Lucas's life. A social worker named Jennifer Martinez walked through his small apartment with a clipboard, asking questions, taking notes, photographing everything. Lucas showed her Emma's room, her school records, her medical files. Patricia sat beside him during the interview, occasionally interjecting legal points, making sure nothing was misrepresented. Mr. Reed, Jennifer said as the visit concluded, I want to be clear that I see no evidence of neglect or abuse here. Your daughter appears healthy, happy, and well cared for. However, the complaint alleged financial instability that might impact your ability to provide adequate care. Can you address that? I work full-time, Lucas said. I make enough to pay rent, buy food, cover Emma's needs. It's tight sometimes, but we manage. She's never gone without anything essential. And your employment is stable? 6 months at Morrison's Hardware. My boss will verify that I'm a reliable employee. Jennifer made notes. I'll include all of this in my report. Barring any new information, I don't anticipate any action being taken. You're doing fine, Mr. Reed. After she left, Lucas collapsed onto his couch, drained. Patricia squeezed his shoulder. You did great. Her report will reflect that Emma is in no danger, which means Harrington's complaint goes nowhere. This was his opening move, and it failed. Lucas wanted to feel relieved, but he knew Richard Harrington had other moves to make. Thursday evening, Claire called with different news. The Foundation Board voted today on the Opportunity Initiative. And? They approved it. Full funding exactly as I proposed. Claire's voice was thick with emotion. Victoria Chen pushed for it. Marcus Webb seconded, and enough others supported it that my father couldn't block it even though he tried. Lucas, the program is going to happen. PS 147 is going to get comprehensive after-school support. Lucas felt something loosen in his chest. That's amazing, Claire. It's more than amazing. It means Emma and her classmates are going to have resources I could only dream about when I was putting together the proposal. It means we won something, even if we lost everything else. You didn't lose everything, Lucas said. You found yourself. That's not nothing. I found you too, Claire said softly. That's definitely not nothing. Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after the Times article published, Lucas was restocking paint supplies when Claire walked into Morrison's Hardware. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she looked more relaxed than Lucas had seen her since the gala. Hi, she said, a shy smile on her face. Hi yourself, Lucas replied, setting down a paint can. What are you doing here? I wanted to see where you work, and I thought maybe we could talk. Lucas glanced at Mr. Morrison, who waved him away. Take your break, Lucas. I've got things covered. They walked to the small park 2 blocks away and sat on a bench under a tree that was just beginning to show spring leaves. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Claire said, So we're famous now. Infamous, maybe, Lucas corrected. True. Claire twisted her grandmother's ring around her finger. Lucas, we need to talk about what happens next. The engagement, the relationship, where we actually stand with each other. Lucas's heart raced. Okay. We started this as a performance, Claire continued. A strategy to protect both of us from my father's control. But it's become something else. Something real and complicated and honestly kind of terrifying. And I think we need to decide if we're actually doing this or if we're just stuck in momentum. What do you want? Lucas asked. Claire looked at him, and Lucas saw vulnerability and hope and fear all mixed together in her expression. I want this to be real. I want to see where this goes without pretending or strategizing or worrying about what makes sense on paper. I want to date you, actually date you, and figure out if what I'm feeling is sustainable or just adrenaline from the chaos we've been living through. And the engagement? We can call it off publicly. Say we rushed into things, we're taking a step back, we're dating, but not engaged. That's honest. We did rush into the engagement. Let's do the relationship part properly. Lucas thought about what she was offering. A chance to start over without the pressure of fake timelines and public scrutiny. A chance to find out if what they had could survive outside of crisis mode. I want that too, he said. The real thing, not the performance. No more pretending. Claire's face lit up with a smile that was pure joy. Yeah? Yeah. Lucas took her hand, lacing their fingers together. Though I should warn you, dating me is pretty boring. I work retail, I have a 7-year-old daughter, and my idea of a fancy date is pizza that I don't have to cook myself. That sounds perfect, Claire said. I'm tired of fancy. I want real. She leaned in and kissed him, slow and sweet, and Lucas felt something settle in his chest, something that felt like hope, like possibility, like the beginning of something that wasn't built on lies or desperation, but on genuine connection. When they pulled apart, Claire rested her head on his shoulder. So what do we do now? Now? Lucas said. You come meet Emma after school. We get that pizza I mentioned. We tell her that yes, Daddy and Claire are dating for real, and we see what happens next. No plan? No strategy? No plan, Lucas confirmed. Just honesty and seeing where it leads. Claire laughed, and it sounded like freedom. I like it. That evening, the three of them sat in Lucas's small apartment eating pizza from paper plates, while Emma told Claire elaborate stories about her classmates and showed her every drawing she'd made in the past week. Claire listened with genuine interest, asked questions, and responded to Emma's enthusiasm with warmth that was impossible to fake. Lucas watched them together and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Contentment. Not the absence of problems or the presence of wealth, just the simple satisfaction of being with people who mattered, doing ordinary things that felt extraordinary because of who he was sharing them with. Later, after Emma was in bed, Claire and Lucas sat on the small couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. My father called today, Claire said quietly. First time since the confrontation. Lucas tensed. What did he say? That I'd made my choice and he hoped I could live with the consequences. That the offer of reconciliation had an expiration date and I was running out of time to reconsider my mistakes. Claire's voice was steady, but Lucas felt her hand tighten on his. I told him I wasn't reconsidering anything, that I was happy, that I was doing meaningful work even without his company, and that maybe someday he'd understand that control and love aren't the same thing. How did he respond? He hung up. Claire lifted her head to look at Lucas. But I'm okay, really, because I have this, you and Emma and a life that's mine instead of his. That's worth more than his approval ever was. Lucas kissed her forehead. You're amazing, you know that? I'm learning, Claire said with a small smile. You're a good teacher. 3 months later, Lucas stood in the gymnasium of PS 147, watching Claire cut the ribbon on the new Opportunity Initiative Center. Emma was beside him, bouncing with excitement, while other families from the neighborhood gathered to celebrate the program that would provide comprehensive after-school support to their children. Claire had thrown herself into the initiative after leaving Harrington Industries, working with the foundation board to implement the program she'd designed. She'd also started consulting with other nonprofits, using her expertise to help them develop strategic plans and funding proposals. The work paid less than her corporate salary had, but Lucas had never seen her happier. She looks pretty, Daddy, Emma whispered. She does, Lucas agreed, watching Claire speak about opportunity and dignity and the importance of investing in communities that others had written off. After the ceremony, Claire found them in the crowd. Emma immediately launched into her arms, and Claire caught her with practiced ease, lifting her up. Did you see, Claire? Did you see the computers? And the art room? And Miss Johnson said there's going to be a science club. I saw, Claire said, laughing. It's pretty great, isn't it? It's the best, Emma declared. Then, with the casual bombshell delivery only children can manage, she added, Are you going to marry my daddy for real now? Because you should. You make him smile. Claire's eyes met Lucas's over Emma's head, and Lucas saw love and humor and possibility in her expression. I don't know, Em. What do you think? Should I marry your daddy? Yes, Emma said emphatically. Then we can be a real family. We're already a real family, Lucas said, moving to stand beside them. Family isn't about marriages or paperwork. It's about people who choose to be there for each other. But you do love her, right, Daddy? Emma asked. Lucas looked at Claire, at the woman who'd walked into his life in desperation and stayed through everything that followed. The woman who read bedtime stories to his daughter and fought for after-school programs and had given up everything familiar to build something authentic. Yeah, baby, he said. I love her. I love you too, Claire said, her voice catching slightly. Both of you. Emma cheered, because of course she did, and several nearby families turned to look at them with knowing smiles. Lucas felt embarrassment heat his face, but he also felt happiness, pure, uncomplicated happiness that had nothing to do with money or status and everything to do with standing in a school gymnasium with the two people who mattered most. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Lucas and Claire sat on his small balcony watching the city lights. It wasn't a penthouse view, but it was theirs. Emma's not subtle, Lucas said. She's 7, Claire replied. Subtle isn't in her vocabulary. She paused, then added, But she's not wrong, about us, I mean. About this being real. No, she's not wrong, Lucas agreed. So what do we do about it? Lucas thought about the question, about everything they'd been through and everything they'd built together. He thought about the fake engagement that had become a real relationship, about the lies that had led to truth, about the performance that had transformed into genuine partnership. We keep doing what we're doing, he said finally. We keep choosing each other, keep building this life we're creating, keep being honest even when it's hard. And maybe someday, when the time is right, we make it official. But there's no rush. We've got time. Claire settled against his shoulder and Lucas felt her relax. I like that plan. Or non-plan. It's kind of become our specialty, Lucas said. Not planning, just being. They sat in comfortable silence, and Lucas thought about the night at the gala when a terrified woman had grabbed his arm and changed everything. He thought about the choices that had followed, the refusals, the risks, the determination to choose integrity over convenience. He thought about Richard Harrington, who'd tried to destroy him and failed, who'd lost his daughter in his effort to control her. Lucas had heard through Claire that Richard had been forced to step down as CEO after several board members expressed concerns about his judgment and management style. The Times article had sparked investigations into other questionable practices at Harrington Industries, and Richard was facing consequences that no amount of money could easily resolve. Lucas should probably feel vindicated. Instead, he mostly felt sad. Sad that a man with so much power had used it so poorly. Sad that Claire's father might never understand what he'd lost. Sad that Emma would grow up knowing her father had been threatened by her future family. But mostly, he felt grateful. Grateful that a moment of courage had led to this. To love and family and purpose. Grateful that he'd chosen to help a stranger and found himself in the process. Grateful for Emma's wisdom and Claire's strength and the ordinary miracle of people who chose to be good even when being good cost everything. What are you thinking about? Claire asked. That I'm the luckiest man alive, Lucas said honestly. Claire lifted her head to look at him. You refused $2 million, got threatened by a billionaire, had your whole life investigated by the media, and almost lost custody of your daughter. That's not exactly lucky. I got you, Lucas countered. I got to help build a program that's going to change kids' lives. I got to teach Emma that standing up for what's right matters more than being safe. I got to discover who I actually am instead of who I thought I had to be. That's lucky. Claire kissed him, and Lucas tasted salt and realized she was crying. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you so much it's terrifying. I love you too, Lucas said. And it's okay to be terrified. We'll figure it out together. Because that was what they did now, figured things out together. faced challenges as partners, built a life that belonged to them instead of performing roles assigned by others. It wasn't perfect or easy, or anything like what Lucas had imagined when he'd put on that rented suit and walked into the Metropolitan Grand Hotel one week that felt like a lifetime ago. But it was real. It was honest. It was theirs. And that, Lucas thought as he held Claire under the stars, was worth more than all the money in Manhattan. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning in Central Park, Lucas knelt on the same ground where Claire had first asked him to commit to their fake engagement. This time, when he asked her to marry him, really marry him, no performance or strategy or ulterior motive, the ring was modest, the moment was private, and the answer was immediate. "Yes," Claire said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, absolutely yes." Emma, who'd been hiding behind a nearby tree with Mrs. Chen, burst out cheering. Lucas laughed and pulled both of them into his arms, his daughter and his fiancée, and the future they were building together. It wasn't the life anyone had planned for him. It was better. Because sometimes the best stories aren't the ones you choose, they're the ones that choose you. And sometimes helping a stranger grab your arm in a crowded ballroom leads to everything you never knew you needed. Sometimes courage and kindness and refusing to be bought are enough to change your whole world. And sometimes, just sometimes, the invisible man finds out that being seen, really seen, for who he actually is worth every risk, every sacrifice, every moment of terror. Lucas Reed had spent his whole life being invisible. But standing in Central Park with Claire's yes still echoing in his ears and Emma's laughter filling the morning air, he'd never felt more visible, more valued, more completely and perfectly seen. And that, he thought, was the real happy ending. Not wealth or status or victory over enemies, but simply being known and chosen and loved for exactly who you are. No pretending required.